Welcome back to another fun episode of Chatting with Indies here in Australia. My name's Dylan, representative from the Indiverse, as in by the shirt and probably the plate down the bottom there. We have today a very special guest, someone who made, honestly, one of the most fascinating RPGs that has inspired a lot of creativity by me, let alone whoever else is out there, especially those history buffs. I know you're out there, gamers. We have Luke from Friends of the Table. How you doing, bud?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Dylan.
We'll start off the day, a little bit of intro. So tell us about yourself, mate. How you going into
Yeah,
games?
yeah, sure thing. I've been a pretty avid tabletop gamer for most of my life at this point. Like many of us, I started with Dungeons and Dragons back in high school. You know, weekends, Saturday night through till whenever our parents came to get us on Sunday, just non-stop D&D. So started with third ed and a bit of second ed, and then absolutely fell in love with 3.5. Sort of that golden era of maximum D&D crunchiness, you know. Like
Oh,
only it was only for the keenest of nerds to figure that incredibly complicated version of D&D out. Um, but yeah, then I moved to Melbourne and sort of left tabletop gaming behind for a little while there because my group was back in Perth, and then I happened to meet somebody in my apartment building in Melbourne who was a massive board game fan, like one of those board game fans that, you know, you go over his place and he's got like, I think he's up to like six different sets of shelves full of games now. He's
my
got over
lord.
500 different games. It's insane. Um, but yeah, got me right back into it. And once I started playing again as an adult, I started to have a lot of ideas for games of my own, and then eventually teamed up with my co-creator Tom, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us today because he's working on his neuroscience PhD. So I guess we'll give him a pass for one day.
Just one.
But just just a little bit of work there. Um, but yeah, so I got into tabletop design pretty full on, making a lot of my own concepts just personally. But then Tom had been working on a big role playing game himself for several years, and I'd helped out as a playtester and given him a lot of feedback. So eventually we sort of said, well, hey, we both got games we want to publish, so let's team up and start a little studio and try to get some of these games off the ground.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. So I might have teased a little bit about Those Who Dare. And I think
Mhm.
that the daring system, which is what you guys want to build out to be a multifaceted thing. But give us like the TLDR. What's the best thing about Those Who Dare, do you think? And then I might share my
Yeah,
part
sure.
too.
Yeah, no worries. So those who dare, I'd say that the big things for me are that it's a role-playing system that was designed like today with all that we know today about tabletop game design and thinking about player experience. As much as we all love games like D&D, you know, there's a special place in my heart for it. I've had a lot of good times. I'm sure I'll have more good times playing it. It also has, like, to borrow an IT term, a lot of tech debt. Um, there's
Yeah.
still stuff in it that's been there from the 80s, and you know, you wouldn't want to cut it because we love it's got nostalgia to it, but also there are barriers for people to get into games like this. So with the daring system and Those Who Dare, the first daring system game, we really thought about, you know, what kind of player experience do we want to have first. So we thought about, you know, what are the problems that people commonly have at the table? Things like, you know, as I've been GMing for so long, you know, there's always someone at most tables who, you know, never knows which dice to roll, who's, you know,
Yep.
leafing through the
Yep.
5 or 6 pages of their character sheet trying to find some piece of information, not even always knowing what they're looking for. So we took a very player experience based approach. We said, you know, how can we strip down all these mechanics to make the game as approachable as possible, but we both love complexity in gaming. So we wanted to be not complicated, but still complex. A lot going on under the hood, so that if you were the kind of nerd like we are, who loves, you know, delving into all these different character options, you know, so you can, in the daring system, you've got your aptitudes, which represent your basic human potential. Then you've got your skills, which are the things that you've learned. And then you've got every skill has its own perk tree. So, you know, if you want to, you can really get into cookie cuttering your character build together. You're not dealing with classes. Instead, it's like, well, my character is good at, say, physical athletics, and has then trained in, being, like they were, say, a circus performer. So they're really good at balance and coordination, and that gives them these very specific advantages. And then the way that we keep the sheet nice and clear, like our simple character sheet is just one page front and back. And the way that we can achieve that is by moving a lot of your action-based information onto an action deck. So those who dare in all daring system games use an action deck. So rather than needing to remember and find all of your actions on the fly from your character sheet, when you're our equivalent of initiative, when you're in an action scene, each player has their own set of action cards. These can change based on the skills that you've taken, and everybody chooses their cards at the same time, places them down face down, and then you reveal them all together. So everybody does their decision making at the same time. You're never waiting for your turn. You just all pick what you're doing, and then you all see the outcome. So nice and quick gameplay.
For me, I have been running a game of D&D, or it's ended sadly, with 6 players, and the big thing when people get to like those bigger amount of players at the table, combat is that big slog, and I would really like to have a big group also like combating against a big group of NPCs and see how quickly that resolves. Because for D&D, for those unaware or haven't had the pain of trying to DM for 6 high level characters, combat can take an hour to 3 or 4, depending on what you're sort of tussling with. So yeah, that's one of those big things that for me as well, I really enjoyed how swiftly things get together and are resolved. I guess not having a bunch of spells, it not being a fantasy setting, means that there's a lot less messing around with like, oh, I could do this or do that. It's very, very straightforward, which I think is like, that adds to that level of simplicity.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I think
we have we find that generally like an hour's D&D combat is more like 10-15 minutes in a daring system game. Wow.
That's
if you love combat, it means you can get through a lot more combats. But if you love roleplay, it means that you won't get stuck in a 1-hour combat and you're just going, when can we get around the campfire and start having some character experiences again, Either way, you can get more of what you love.
I think I like as well, like you said, a classless system, like not having like your classic, like your fighter, your wizard, your ranger sort of thing, allows you to not have someone, unless they really just want to be combat orientated, having that flexibility to pick and choose how they craft the character and not feeling locked into one thing or locked out of other things just because of some of the stuff they want to take. I think that's really one of those things that I really enjoyed about finding out more about classless systems like yours. And God, there's so many out there now that look fantastic that I'll never have a chance to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's too many out there to actually get to enjoy them all, even though there's so many good ones. But no, I completely agree. Like I think that class systems, I was actually having a conversation about this with somebody just a couple of days ago. The thing that I worry about with the future of class systems is that they're very sort of like mobile gaming in my opinion. Like they sort of pigeonhole the players into this is what you do, and it means that you can have a lot of fun with that. Like that's not a criticism, but it means that like the role play is at odds with like your character in a way, because you haven't built your character out to be some entirely unique thing. You're fitting them into a box. You go, this is the wizard box, this is the fighter box, and yeah, there's a lot of variance that you can achieve within that, but you still have to be in a box. There's no way that you can get outside of that box, basically. Whereas with classless systems and like those who dare, we actually like the way that we first started out building out the skill system was we went, how can we make a role-playing game with a skill system more like Skyrim?
Yeah.
How can we make a system where the more you use it, the more you level it up? And so like you've got your basic aptitudes and then your skills that are learned experiences, and you learn from experience, so you use those skills and you get to level those skills up, and as you level them up, you either get better with those skills or you can develop new ways to use those skills by taking more perks for those skills. So it gives you tremendous flexibility in who you end up being once your character's developed a bit.
What I'd love to try and I know you guys, I don't think I've ever mentioned this. I literally just had the idea now because thinking about the classless systems, I'd love to try like a level 0 as a developmental thing for a character. So as you're fed prompts either by the GM or even just like maybe a random like prompting deck, there's so many games like that that sort of allow you to build out narrative for characters. I'd love to
Yep.
see what those experiences would come out and how people would make something that builds out like a level 1 or level 1 of what Those Who Dare
Yep.
has as like a truly natural experience for that player and character. Man, that would
Yep.
be a time.
We did even actually, one of our playtest campaigns was like that. We
Oh,
did do a playtest campaign where people started as young adults. And so they just had their aptitudes. It was played in sort of like a fictitious colonial new world that we didn't use America specifically, but like it was sort of 1600s-esque where, we were a long way away from home, and these were some young people who wouldn't have received any education or anything like that.
yeah.
So yeah, the whole party was just, you had your aptitudes, and otherwise, it was, what are you going to do? How are you going to like build up skills, learn things? And it was actually a lot of fun to do that. It starts you off slow and bad at so many things, but I guess that's a big part of role players. Like often it's the failures that really define what's going on rather than the successes. And one of the philosophies behind the daring system, as the title suggests, is that it is very much a system that success is on a knife's edge. There's a momentum to victory, and if you succeed, you're more likely to keep succeeding. When you're good at something, you're more likely to do it really well consistently. But you can also just fall off that cliff, and things will all come falling. They'll cascade into worse and worse and worse. So
Yeah, yeah, and that's I think that's some of the things that I think there's only one piece of circling back to D&D that I think really give it kudos to Wizards for doing that in adding that flexibility in the ability scores that are given to each race. How they've taken that away and allow you to just sort of pick, you don't have to have an orc that always has +2 in strength and +1 in con. I think that's also around, but like
yeah.
they allow you to pick 2 in one and one in the other. I think that's a nice level of flexibility that comes with a system that has classes, like adding flexibility outside of that restrained area. And kudos to Wizards just for that part. Most of the other stuff that they do in there, I think, yeah, it sort of falls into that you fit this box or this box or this box. But something is better, I guess, than nothing. There's a lot of flavor, and race can add a lot of, like, especially in D&D, with so many different choices to make there.
Yeah.
There's always that little bit of, like, variety you add in there, but I think you're right. I think classless for me is something I really want to investigate more, especially with like that natural growth I mentioned before of like how people progress and how they want to make this character, whether they make it as a thing of themselves or as like how I often like to do a character opposite to me to challenge myself to be a different type of role player, much to the chagrin of many people at the table to play with. But hey, look, it's part of the fun.
I think once you've been playing for long enough, it's sort of like a trope at this point. The new players play like Lord of the Rings characters,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then you see like the 10 or 20-year veteran who's like, no, I'm playing something completely absurd. Like, I don't want to play anything that's like serious or realistic.
Yeah.
My current D&D character is a fat cat. So they're a Tabaxi noble, and they became a wizard not because they really have an interest in magic, it's because their family's wealth was almost spent. So they went to magic school to learn how to replace the conveniences that they're losing as their fortune declines. So their spell list is all, familiar, unseen servant, floating disc, their conjuration. The most likely state you'll find this bat cat wizard is having used their minor conjuration to summon a giant 5-foot plush cushion, and that cushion is then atop a Tensor's floating disc, and then they have an unseen servant pushing them around on their giant floating throne.
I can, oh man, that I can see the people who at your table who like to play very effectively and efficiently, looking at you using spells in that way, being like, "Why, man? You're wasting stuff for the day." But that's just the flavor that you bring. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, I've seen so many, and made so many interesting characters over the years after having like done my cookie cutter 1 to 5 or so. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, man.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. Yeah. And you know, at this point, the party knows. Don't expect the only damaging spell Haydini, the cat wizard, has
It's
is
great name
bonfire.
too.
So I'm not contributing to the combat.
Oh, look. And then, look, at least they know. They go into combat and they're like,
Yep.
well, we know what's happening here. I'm currently playing a game that we have a pacifist paladin.
Mhm.
That is an interesting time every single time, trying to convince them that that is not a person who is good and you're allowed to hit them with your hammer. It's a time. But you know, it's one of the agreements at the table. They came to it, and it's like a social thing. They're like, "Hey, I'm going to play this, and this is how you get around it." So they sort of preloaded us with what they wanted to do and how to manage any frustrations that came from that character at the table. And it's honestly been one of the best experiences to having conflict without conflict at the table. Yeah, a great time. Could tell you some hilarious stories of like
Yeah.
screaming and yelling when people are falling off cliffs and stuff. And she's like, "All
Mhm.
right, I guess I'll come in now and help."
Yeah. No, I think that's it, you know, like it's also really fun to play, you know, the Dragonborn like god fantasy, but yeah, definitely a lot of the most fun times I've had are when I've had to try and figure my way through challenges without using the classically powerful things. And I think to circle back a little bit, yeah, that with Those Who Dare, that's very much something that we wanted to create as part of the player experience is that, you know, there's actually, I can't remember off the top of my head, there's actually some like 60 plus different skills that you could learn, but each character is can only learn up to six of them, and most characters will learn fewer than six. So realistically, you know, if you're playing around with less than 10% of the skills in the game, and then even of the skills that you've chosen, you know, I might go, oh yeah, no, I'm good with long guns, but I've gone for, you know, the sniper build, whereas somebody else is going, oh well, I took long guns, but I've taken like the assault specialist, so I'm good with like assault rifles and, you know, running and gunning. So we've got the same skill, but we use them in entirely different manners. Um, yeah, and that sort of means that you are always going to have to try and think, well, how can we best apply these skills to the situations that come up? Because you're going to be, even in a party of six players, you're going to be missing most of the skills in the game. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and even that, like you said, like you've got the skills and you've got like the specializations underneath. So like even if people are wanting to take like, oh, I take one combat thing, maybe a social thing, and then like that already ties up, you know, a couple of those things to what people would assume they like need to make a character kind of work in most situations. Like if they're being that jack of all trades kind of deal, which is what I kind of expect from most people first timing it. As you get like more coordinated with the group you play with, or even if you just play with the same people again, then you might start to see some like pillars of different things that work and make the game, I guess, like make players just a little more refined in how they approach stuff. Experience like
Yep.
anything sort of makes that sort of thing around the table come together a lot smoother. So yeah, I'd be very interested to see how like over the years, if you find that those that you have played with a couple of times, if they have those like roles that they fill, because
Yep.
even then, one of the big things about your game is that it goes across the Stone Age to the Zenith Age, I believe it's called the Zen
And
Age.
it is the
Oh
last
man,
stage.
see,
Yeah.
pulling it out, I know.
Yep.
Absolutely read the book front to back many times.
Yeah, no, that's the other thing I was thinking we didn't touch on before when I was
Mm,
talking about those good areas. I talked about the mechanics, but not actually about what it's about, what the setting is. So perhaps this is a good opportunity to mention that. Yeah, so
yeah.
the daring system is the underlying mechanics, but Those Who Dare, the first game that we've made, Tom and I, we're both history nerds, and so we both went, well, we'll start by making the game we want to play. So we made a historic fiction role-playing game. And so the way that we approached that was we split human history and its future into 12 ages, running all the way from the Stone Age to the Zenith Age. And so there's three post-today ages, but the other nine are all historic through to today. And each age sets out what was going on in the world at the time, what were the kinds of skills that people knew, what was invented during this period, what equipment was readily available, whether things were common, uncommon, etc., etc. So it provides groups with everything that they need to play whenever they want to. That was our original vision, which I think was a really good starting point because it means, it's quite an adaptable system. You could just as easily be a Stone Age tribe trying to survive or say migrate across, Europe or something like that. Or you could also be, Romans trying to escape the city of city of Constantinople at the fall of the city. You could be World War II, etc., etc. So many different options. And one of the really cool things that we've discovered since then is that from people coming up to us at conventions and saying, "Is this like Civilization, the role-playing game?" And we went, "Yeah, look, that's what we built. We weren't thinking about that, but yeah, no, you're 100% right. We built Civilization, the role-playing game. You could 100% play through each age in order if you wanted to. You could play a Whovian-esque time-hopping campaign and be jumping around. You could play, like Space Marines who crash land on a medieval world, but you've still got your futuristic armor and weapons or something. So it also has that opportunity for time hijinks, basically. If you can blend the ages however you want to create the game that is going to be most enjoyable for you and your table.
One thing that we always say when messing with time at the table, let everyone know before we start what time rules we use, because we can't have some people on Back to the Future and some people on some other system. That's got to be predetermined. Otherwise, there's going to be nothing but chaos at the table. So that's a fair warning from us.
Yeah. Yeah, we're thinking about a time traveler's supplement to those who dare to help flesh out those kinds of things of, how to guide your group through how does our continuity work.
Yep. I think that and look, it's like any game. Like it's something that you put out there for those who may not want to take the time or energy to develop that. Because you think about the ripple effects that you always see in like the classic tropes of movies and that. And role players are exceptionally creative and they like to break things. So they will definitely break it if they can. So yeah, I think having something there would be awesome. And yeah, I'm a big advocate for like the time Whovian-esque hijinks of that as someone who just likes just the idea of it. I've always wanted to try something with time cops, and I tried to give it to my previous game, but they didn't bite at all. So hey, look, I'll try it somewhere else.
Yep, that's okay. These things happen. I've got a few campaigns that I've written at various points that I thought, this is my magnum opus of a campaign, and then the players are like, oh, it doesn't sound that good.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh well, I didn't already put 30 hours into writing it, whatever.
Look, we all learn our lessons as like creatives. It's like whether you're doing like creating games, creating role play settings, or just campaigns and stuff for your players. There's always things to learn, and never expect the players or players that you have, whether you're playtesting, to play or interact with your game at all like you do, because it is just impossible.
Yeah. Whatever you think you planned, you could have written your own Lord of the Rings, and then session one, it will get derailed when the players ignore the shadowy figure in the back of the pub and instead are like, who's this, who's this goblin at the bar? Or, who's this, I only want to talk to the barkeeper, or, who's that drunk outside, like, no matter what you wanted the party to focus on, they don't care.
Another PSA: no interesting goblins with funny names. That you're derailing yourself. Like it's your own fault at that point. Just don't do it. It's not worth it.
Yeah,
I've made the mistake.
Yeah, in the last D&D campaign that I was running, my players refused to stay at the inn in town, which I'd written a bunch of stuff about, and instead they were like, no, it costs too much. Friggin' D&D. And they were like, where can we stay? And I'm like, well, crossing up the road a little bit, there's like a budget flop house for like migrant workers and stuff. And they're like, yeah, we'll go stay there instead. And I was like, okay, fine. And they're like, who's running it? And I'm like, all right, and I came up with the name Mrs. Joannathan. And for some reason, I decided that she was a widower with 9 sons, but that none of them were home at the moment. And it has been years, and I am obligated to include one of her sons in every campaign. It is like, a couple of them have like, in their long-term notes, like how many Joannathans have they met? And it's like I collect them all thing at this point.
So the last campaign you run is a party that's designed to go out and collect all of the suns from all the weird and wonderful places they've turned up, and that's the
It's
campaign.
it's been an ongoing. It's actually it started out as the Ghost of Saltmarsh
Oh, yep, yep,
Wizard
yep.
of the Coast module, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of because I think some of the best fifth ed stuff they've released has been them like updating the classic campaigns,
Oh,
some of
yeah,
the
yeah.
like greatest hits kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Saltmarsh I think did that really well. For a WotC publication, I was really impressed that I didn't need to work too hard for it compared with some of the other stuff that they put out. It had a lot of stuff about, this is the greater region, this is the kingdom. Yeah, it's actually a really good module. I would recommend it for those looking um, for a out of the box campaign for fifth ed. Ghosts of Saltmarsh is, I think it's same as Yawning Portal. I think it's 7 short campaigns that they stitched together in a cohesive region. And yes, we've played through I think 3 or 4 of them, and we've sort of had a couple like interlude homebrew campaigns set in that same kingdom of Keelan. So yeah, there's yeah, we've sort of the collection of the Joannathans been going on for a while now. This sort of seasonalized continuous campaign.
Yeah, I feel, I don't know. I've had some mixed things when it comes to like what they've written out, but I think that like source books campaign books as a general rule of thumb, no matter what system you go to, I think that there is a real art to getting it done right. Well, not even right, just to make the experience as easy for those who don't have the time to invest into something massive, but then enough flexibility to like let you throw something in there, throw something out there.
Yep.
And that comes down
Yep.
to like just the person behind the screen who's actually orchestrating the events of what's happening.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
you guys mentioned, and we've had quite a few chats between the time that we met and now, about what you guys are looking next for the daring system. I'm not sure if you're able to share what that new system is, but it's something that I have been like wanting to get my
Yep.
hands on and playtest for a long time.
Yeah, no, well, hopefully we'll be starting playtesting in a couple of months. We had not intended on starting to work in earnest on this one until late this year or early next year, as we were working on another game, which is just a party card game called Nothing Left But to Cry, which has been a lot of fun after the tome that Those Who Dare turned into. Working on something light and easy has been really great, which, by the way, that will be kickstarting later this year. But yeah, that one we were focused on, but because of the trade war, we've sort of postponed that one from being like next month to being later this year. So that sort of get freed up some time now. So we decided, yeah, we'll start working on our next daring system game, which is Miskatonic High. And so Miskatonic High is a game that I came up with several years ago, but at the time I didn't get too much further than writing out sort of the conceptual level stuff. And at the time I didn't have my own role-playing system. So as it turns out, though, it lends itself really well to the daring system because one of the things that I did envision for Miskatonic High was it needed a cycle of gameplay where you can go run through in a structured manner your academic commitments, and then the idea is that sorry, missed a step here. The players are playing as students at Miskatonic High School, which, for those who aren't familiar, Miskatonic University is the fictitious university that H.P. Lovecraft came up with in his literary works, and so Miskatonic University is a location that comes up over and over and over again. It's where the Necronomicon is held. All kinds of things revolve around this university and the surrounding town. So we thought, wouldn't it be fun to be high school students at the attached high school? Sort of Harry Potter-esque, sneaking out of your dorms at night to contend with Lovecraftian horrors. Still having that lightheartedness, but also with like a darker tint to it. So the idea was that, yeah, this game would require you as a player to balance those two aspects of your life, trying to like keep up with your academic requirements while you're also, exhausting yourself every night going out because there's bigger problems than the next math test, Yeah. And so that actually slots really well into the daring system, which has a structured downtime, and so we can adapt that into that actually being your downtime is your classes, and you've got to keep up with that, but that's also when you have sort of your most routine time, so it's when you regain some of your resources. Yeah, so we've got quite a lot of good ideas for how to build that out.
Well, the thing that got me, and one of the things, there's so many things in the daring system that I love, and we still haven't touched on this one either. It's like the pathway. So, like moving. So, if we're playing, like we spoke about, following through all 12 ages of those who dare, your character is going to be extremely old or very questioned by the time they get to the Zenith age as to how the hell they've
Yeah.
made it from A to Z. So they have you have a system that allows players to like inherit stuff from like previous characters, and I think that that's a really good system for like accumulating that knowledge when you have a character shifting through the years of school, and whether you start as like do the classic American three stages of like of high school, or if you do like the most of the rest of the world, I believe, which is like 7 through 12, or there's sort of 6 year structure there.
Yep.
I think that that's one of
Mhm.
those things that would be very interesting to see how those things develop and change over time.
Mm. Yeah, no, and that is something that we've started to look into. So yeah, I'm particularly fond of the ending system, which is what you're referring to. Yeah, so we we came at that from the concept of players should have encouragement, at least soft encouragement. You don't have to end your characters, but we wanted to reward people for thinking about complete story arcs to their characters. So rather than, sort of like 80s action TV series, like no matter what you've been through, then the next episode you're fine again and, you're ready to save the world another time. Instead, we wanted players to think about like, well, what are we wanted that realism of like, well, what does my character actually want? And when they get what they want, would they keep adventuring? Would they keep soldiering? Would they keep doing whatever it is that our group's doing? And so, like, you do have, as expected, endings could mean that your character has died, but endings could also mean that you're retiring because you've just had enough. And endings can also mean you're advancing. You can outgrow the party. The example I always use is if you were, adventuring because you wanted to get rich, well, once you get rich, why would you keep adventuring? But whatever ending you take, there are then tangible benefits for the rest of the party that are carrying on. So in that same example, if you got rich and, bought a corporation or started one and now you were like some wealthy business person, sure, you might not be heading out with the party anymore, but the party now has a wealthy contact. So, that could mean you could help outfit them. New characters could start with better gear, or perhaps you're a contact that's now got connections to the government or something like that. There's all kinds of ways that endings can benefit the rest of the party. And that does create like a dichotomy of if you keep one character around a long time, they'll probably end up with really high level skills. They'll be able to do stuff other characters can't do. But if you don't have people end, you will hamstring your party. So there's that trade-off of you do want to think about you don't want to be ending a character every session, but you do want to be thinking about, well, what does the finish line look like for my character? What is the full story that I'm trying to tell here? Not just before this I was a fisherman or something and now I'm saving the world from nuclear like bombs or something like that. Like, okay, well, there's got to, what's that last act going to look like? What does it look like once you save the world from the bombs?
Yeah.
And so for Miskatonic, to circle back there's I started doing some research about this because we're history nerds, and I wanted to know, like, H.P. Lovecraft's work set in the early 1900s. Did they even have high schools? And the answer is no.
No.
Um,
Okay.
so the norm in America at the time was that about the low 70% of Americans did go to schooling at that time, but schooling ended for most people at around about 14 years old.
Okay.
Which is kind of good because we actually didn't really want to deal with like the sort of 12, 13, 14-year-old sort of time period. We were wanting to focus on more like 15 through 18 sort of age. So that works out quite well. So what we're imagining it as is rather than it being a high school, specifically the way we think about it today. It's not, lockers and alarm bells, but instead it is, at the time, what you would have had would have been grammar schools and finishing schools. So once you'd finished your primary education, or elementary, as they like to call it in America, you're still not old enough to go to university, but universities, of course, existed. And for those who were on some kind of an academic track, or their family wanted them to go into a specific industry, like say you were, you were going to become a lawyer or a doctor or something, like, yeah, there were bridging schools that filled that gap, and they're kind of the equivalent of what we'd consider a high school today. So Miskatonic High will be sort of a 4-year school where people are, sort of 14 through to 18, maybe 19, before they then head off to university. So that gives us gives us a good contained window of, like, how many grades could people be here for? What kind of ages are people going to be? Yeah, so we're making some good progress on figuring out how this school actually works.
Don't even have to do the heavy lifting. You have someone else who's already decided how the system works as far as the American education system. So hey, look, lean on where you can get it.
They figured this out in 1910. Why do I need to break new ground? Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, I'm just excited. As someone who's just come into like a whole new bunch of role players games outside of D&D and whatever my friends could drag me to before Indieverse. Yeah, it's exciting. It's super exciting. But you talked a little bit about the creative process, and that's such a unique thing that comes to people in all different ways. We have people who make party games and they just want to pick on like a specific mechanic or that. So what tool for yourself in such a complex game as far as like rule set, what's the biggest help that you've had to sort of like get you comfortable to start putting these things down and being like, yeah, this is what I'm making? What's that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And probably the biggest answer, although I've never actually thought about this before, probably I can't avoid saying it's Dungeons and Dragons, because I've been homebrewing for so long, and personally, what I thought I was bringing to the table most in Tom and my initial collaboration was that I'm very mechanically minded. And so I've spent a lot of time, coming up with my own table rules and then observing how those work for, over the years, hundreds of players at my tables. And so I felt like from the get-go, I had a very good grasp of like, well, if we change, if currently those who dare started out as basically a D&D homebrew, and like so many games, you start from something that you recognize, and then you start going through, what if we change this to be that, and what if we change that to be this? And yeah, so we started thinking about, well, what here is impacting player experience negatively, and what here is, or what could we add in to improve player experience instead? And we thought about what kinds of things were we trying to get out of characters we were playing, or that we've observed players trying to get out of their characters. And yeah, that's basically the design philosophy that we took, was thinking about that. How does each aspect of this game, what does that actually do to players at the table? And if you change it in various ways, how will that change that experience for people?
Yeah, great. You talk about like playtest at the table and like having your observations. How much feedback from players did you seek out? And then how much, regardless whether it was sought out for or just given, did you guys take on board when making these decisions?
So less than we would like, I'll readily admit. This is one of the reasons why Those Who Dared was released as a Founders Edition, not as a First Edition, because while we're pretty confident that the mechanics are there, that it is a fully functional and enjoyable game, as just two indie devs, there's only so much playtesting that we can do, especially when your average gameplay session is 4 hours.
Yeah.
So, there's some things that is just a practical impossibility to test on a large scale. So the total development since Tom started working on it was probably in the area of about 5 years, until when we published last year. And over that time, it was probably run through like I want to say about 6 long form campaigns.
Wow.
And then probably in the area of about two or three hundred like one-shot sessions, where we could just run people through something quick. We got a lot of feedback. We especially relied on. We were actually quite fortunate to have a really strong role-playing community around us from the start, which is, for those from Melbourne, Pixel Bar and Cafe down near Monash University. That's actually where Tom and I met, going to D&D there. And yeah, there is a great community of GMs and players there. And so we were able to tap into some really talented GMs who'd been running games for years to get them to play and or run their own games for it. So we could get quite a lot of high-level feedback. But at the end of the day, I guess that's one of the things, is that until you send it out into the world, we were to play it completely independently of us, we're sure there will be things in that book that are completely broken, and we look forward to hearing about those. Like I've actually I started running a game recently during an interlude in a friend's D&D game, and yeah, somebody in character creation figured out like I can just knock out every character with these like two abilities, and I was like, yep, cool. So that's note that down for my errata list. With your starting character, you've already figured out how to like negate any NPC. Okay, yep, that was an oversight, and it's just a simple rewording would fix it. But that's the thing, is we sadly don't have rules lawyers working for us like say Wizard of the Coast does. And yeah, but it's kind of also part of the fun, like, I mean, any role-playing game has some degree of homebrewing and table ruling, and so that's we're really looking forward to, as the player base of Those Who Dare grows, getting that feedback so that we can tweak and adapt and push towards an actual first edition that's even more polished.
I think the thing that I look forward to seeing as it grows is seeing people have their builds listed online like they do for D&D, with like their feats and stuff plastered across, because that would be invaluable. And I like I said, I've been through the book. I've read the book one time, like pretty much on the way back from when I first bought it when we met. And I haven't picked it up again since, so it's not as fresh in my brain. But I remember sitting there, I think it was in the Uber, and then like when I got home and I was just jotting down some stuff, I'm like, if I make something, I'm gonna make something silly like this. So yeah, there's definitely a couple of like things in there. But like you said, even if you had rules lawyers working with you guys, going through the game, there's just they're not every single perspective, and like not everyone's brain works so differently in how they view things and how they put it together. So like I just don't think that there is a way you could feasibly make a game as versatile as yours, balanced as they would call it. But having be good at a couple of things like negating NPCs, what about combat though? There's so many other things, or like trying to find stuff in an urban environment or like a natural environment. Like there's so many things that they suck at because they're really good at this specific thing. And I think that's what classless I really like about that too. Gives you that ability to pillar yourself or to spread yourself out as you like, compared to what a class does. Yeah,
100%. And we did actually kind of deliberately lean into it as well. Like, we knew that we couldn't cover everything, and with the complexity of all of the perk trees, there's some stuff in there that we were like, this is for the power gamers. There's definitely there's a few combos that I know about. I'm not going to post them anywhere, but I'm going to wait for the community to be like, is this intentional? And me go, yes, that is one of the best combos in the game. Yeah, and I look forward to people coming up with these builds, because there'll be some that I haven't realized. There's a few that I definitely know are like, there's some that it's not even a secret. Like there's a couple of skill trees out there that I deliberately made really strong, or like really good at doing something in particular. Like I think two of my favorite perk trees that I had coming up with was there's in the unarmed combat or the martial arts skill tree, there's it runs on like different ways of approaching combat. So you've got like your brawler, you've got like a street fighter, you've got like a wind stance, which is sort of you're like really flowing like high mobility combat. You've got a boxer, so someone who's like hard to hit, and then when they hit you, it's like a brick wall. And a couple of those, like wind stance, we rebounced a couple of times because I wanted to build that that if you pushed hard into that tree, if you go deep to the capstone abilities, you can't be hit in combat unless there's a bunch of characters all gunning for you at once. Like in any one-on-one, no one is touching you. 2-on-1, no one's touching you. 3-on-1, now maybe they're wearing you down a little bit. But the idea is that you can basically become untouchable. And similarly with the boxer tree, I also made that one. That's sort of like the inverse, where if you push really deep into that tree, you can end up at a point where if you get a headshot, you will always knock the person out. So
Damn. Iron Fist.
Yeah,
I like it.
yeah, pretty much, yeah, because I mean that is, we did try to keep an element of realism to everything we're doing because it's meant to be rooted in realism with historic fiction. So, but the reality is like the hardest hitters in the world, if they hit you in the head, it doesn't matter who you are, you're gonna drop. You're done.
Yeah, that's it.
And
yeah.
so we did want to represent these things that, there are real life things people do that are OP. There's things the Homo sapiens species are really good at, and if you take advantage of the strengths of our species, well, you'll get good results. So
yeah. And like you spend all that time and energy is like you're choosing that pillar to stand on, but everything else around, like it allows you to play that in that flexibility, which is so good. I think that's like one of the things that I'm really enjoying as coming into like the indie tabletop space is like people who do rules. And I've had so many discussions with people about like how their rules work, what can I do to make them better. I was thinking about doing this thing or doing that thing that aren't massive degrees of difference. And the openness and accepting to something that I realized so early on is like people will play it however they want. But to give your game maybe some like replayability or like difficulty in like scale, bigger or lower, higher or lower, easier, harder, however you want to put it together, Dylan, is having those in your instruction manuals, your booklets, your things that say, hey, if you'd like it to be a little bit more challenging after you've played it 5-10 times, take this out, add this, more of this, less of this. And I think that's a great thing to give that sort of like freedom and space. It also encourages people to make their own home rules for the game that they might play 50 to 100 times. I know that my partner and I have done it for like a lot of the games. Sorry for any of the indies that I've done it to and it's not okay, but it's the sort of thing like where it just makes it more accessible. One of the big things, and I've spoken about this before, I can't remember who with at this point, was there's an amazing game that I got at PAX last year, Crane, the Fractured Empire. And they have these amazing, it's a little card with some of their art, one of their characters on it, and it has these 2 rotary wheels with numbers on it to denote what life or health you're on. And we've been using those because they're just so easy to pick up, use, and it's just beautiful art with a slider. We've been using it for games to score points and stuff. My partner has trouble keeping track of the numbers like in her head. Just there's a lot of things happening on some of the games that we play, and I'm like, cool, well, let's put some things that make it easier to sort of start to understand how those structures work. And then we take it away if we're feeling like we want a more complex game or one that's like really strategically like against each other, which we only started to do maybe last week. So I think that's one of those things that I think a lot of designers should, like, if you've got questions of like 1 hair, 2 hairs difference, like chuck it in. People will love to see what kind of things they can do with the game that they've got if they're not that kind of creative sided.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Yeah. It's especially when you're talking about role-playing games, like the player experience is going to be so diverse and people are going to want very different things out of your game or out of their gameplay experience, and you can't plan for all of that. I think the better way to go about it is get the hell out of the way. Like it's one of the this is probably my biggest issue with Dungeons and Dragons. Not that I just want to, rag on Dungeons and Dragons. Again, I've had so much fun playing Dungeons and Dragons, but as such a long-term GM, like it literally like breaks my heart when I see someone try D&D. There's so many people are doing these days.
Yeah.
And what they've heard is you can do anything. And then they sit down at that table and they say, okay, well, I want to do this. And immediately the whole table turns into, no, you can't do that. And that's because like you can build up like rule sets, whether we're talking about the law, whether we're talking about a game, whether we're talking about, how you're meant to behave at the bank, um, rule sets can either be permissive or um, uh, what's the alternative? Essentially, they can be inclusionary or
Yeah,
exclusionary.
yeah, yeah.
And so, they can either be delineating these are the things you're allowed to do, and everything outside of that is not allowed.
Mm.
Or you can have the inverse. If you go, well, these are the things that you're not allowed to do, and if we haven't said you're not allowed to do it, you can do it. And it's an approach that any system of rules can take one or the other. And Dungeons and Dragons is a system of permission.
Mm.
If it doesn't say on your sheet you can do something, then the default is you can't do it. Now, that is why perhaps the most common and beloved table rule of Dungeons and Dragons is the rule of cool. If you come up with something that's a good idea, but the game doesn't allow for it, it's commonly accepted that, the GM will find some way to fit it into the game,
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that to me says, okay, so when your number one home rule for a game is that you can ignore any of the rules of the game, that means the rules of the game are really in people's way. And so, yeah, like that's and those who dare is probably to a lesser extent guilty of the same thing. I would say that it's a game of permissions rather than exclusions. And but far less so. The idea of delineating like the free play is that there shouldn't be anything in your way except for during the crunchiness of an action scene. When you're actually in combat, then you've got these cards that tell you what you can do. And so yeah, you can also be part way. It's a gradient, not like an either or specifically, but yeah, like that the idea that you design your game to start with, so that yeah, when someone says like, well, I want to do this, it's not about, well, do the rules allow for this? It's instead it's like, yeah, great, cool, we can fit that into the game somehow.
yeah.
Yeah.
I really think that there's and and ever all the people I've spoken to who say the same thing about D&D, I think we all have missed, and I didn't notice it even after reading it front to back. There is a single paragraph or entry somewhere in the DMG, the original print. I'm not sure if the reprint has it in there. That says basically that it verbatim has the rule of cool in there, but it is not. I don't think it's front and center enough in that manual, which is a couple of hundred pages long, to like really encourage that as part of the system. And it is like the quote unquote homebrew rule, because it doesn't sit also in one of the rule areas. So it's like, well, is this a rule or isn't it? So what is it? Like, it doesn't, there's not that understanding of where it sits. But yeah, I agree. I think that when you start looking at it from like, well, people are going to start doing things and playing it the way that they want. So bringing in that little bit of flexibility is never a bad thing. And I think that one of the other areas for those who dare that you'd only see, and only really from a narrative structure, is like what time period you're sitting in. Unless it's predefined to say, hey, there's like, there's tanks rolling through the Stone Age. A character isn't going to be like, well, there should be a tank somewhere floating around, even though we're all tribesmen, and well before any of that is adapted. So like, yeah, there's things that sit in there, but I think that that's more just, it goes without saying, because you have limitations in your setting and it's an understood sort of time frame. But again, that's like nitpicking at best. So
And yeah, like I was just gonna say, like, and a lot of it just comes down to like the approach of the GM. And for me, like, such a big thing for me about GMing is expectation setting. Because whether you are aware of it or not, when you're running a game, you're making promises to people, and it's when you break those promises that you create problems. If you if you invite a group of people to a table and you sit them down and you say, oh, we're going to play this game and it's going to be heaps of fun, and they are all they've all come thinking it's going to be a light-hearted time, and you've actually brought them together to play the Dark Souls board game. You've broken a promise to them because their expectation has been defined. Even if you didn't explicitly say, you're gonna have this experience, and then you don't deliver, the perception is still the same. That you create an expectation when you bring people together to play a game, and that those expectations could be really soft. Some people will react better to having those expectations broken than others. Um, but at the end of the day, yeah, like it is really, in my mind, really important for the GM to set that stage correctly of, you know, this is the kind of experience that we're going to aim for, and yeah, and then try and deliver on that promise to the players.
The when at CanCon this year, I bought Eat the Reich by someone Deckard, and oh man, I'm gonna butcher the name, so I'm just gonna like, yep, no, we'll just get it halfway out there. We're not gonna edit it out. You guys can enjoy me making a fool of myself. Delightful. One of the best expectation setting in book um instruction sets, just everything was phenomenal. It being something based around, the middle of World War II, and obviously having a lot of the fascist iconography out there, and it being a very sensitive topic for many, many people for various reasons. The way in which they talk about approaching those things with different people, and like having comforts and things to give to players that allow them to show like, hey, I'm not okay with this, or can we do less of this, built into how the game is structured, I think is one of those big things that makes like sort of, it only just says like, yes, that's exactly how you want to set that expectation for people. And if you're looking for something that is exceptionally well written and you could easily tailor it to any setting that you want to put together, check out Eat the Reich. It's not a super expensive game. It's not like a big massive D&D game. It's a single short run hyper violent session that's meant to churn and burn you through just going through the middle of Paris and look, doing some great and horrible things. But yeah, definitely worth a read just for that like intro, giving people exactly what they need to get started and things to do and things to avoid. So good.
Yeah.
So very good.
Yeah.
I swear at some point I'm going to have to get a little thing behind it that says, I actually really love D&D, because everyone who makes it like just to end up talking about roleplay games, it's always like the scapegoat, because everyone understands what it is, and then because everyone understands it's what you poke holes into, so I'm going to have to get something at some point.
Yeah. It's such a monolith. Yeah, it's hard to talk about other games without talking about D&D, which is, a testament to the success of the game. And I am trying to, like, just generally, I've been trying to, like, not refer to D&D in negative terms, because I think it is completely fair to have constructive criticisms of anything. But at the same time, it's like D&D wasn't built for the same thing that Those Who Dare was. It's not trying to achieve the same thing that Those Who Dare was. So it's not really fair to say, like, well, yeah, D&D might fail at doing what Those Who Dare is doing, but it wasn't trying to do that. It's like if someone walked up to me right now and say, hey, you just failed the marathon, I'd be going, okay, I don't care. I wasn't doing the marathon. Like,
Yeah.
that's fine. Okay. Do I still get a medal? But yeah, and D&D, like, when we look at its development over the years, like it started as an adaptation of a tabletop war game, and then it developed into a dungeon crawler. And it is good at those things. Like D&D combat is well set out. There's cool stuff people can do. You get to have great moments when you do those crits, when you're the one who takes down the dragon or the dungeon or whatever you're fighting. Like when you're actually going through a dungeon, like I've actually found that the D&D that I still really enjoy isn't so much the open world exploration, because I feel like D&D is not great as a role-playing tool, but it is great as a dungeon crawler. Like when I played through the revamped Tomb of Annihilation a few years back,
man.
like that was so much fun.
Yeah.
When I ran people through, like most of the Salt Marsh modules are actually just dungeons with decoration around them, and running through like the Shrine of Tomoa-chan and stuff. Like there's some great dungeons, and there's some crap in there which I, as the GM, go like, this is insanely unfair to the players. But then it's so much fun seeing how they come up with ways to deal with it. And as a GM, like providing them with like ways to deal with this like insane crapshoot of a challenge that they're about to face. Like the one that I always use as an example is from the Shrine of Tomoa-chan, which I think actually is a Yonic Portal module. But there's It is a really old dungeon. It's a stupid dungeon. It's the same kind of brain fart as Tomb of Horrors kind of crap, but
Oh yeah,
it's not that
yeah,
bad.
yeah, yeah,
There's a trap in that dungeon where like they approach these massive double doors and they're stuck in this dungeon. They can't leave because the intro to this this isn't a spoiler because it's literally how the adventure starts is that you fall into the dungeon and so you start at the end of the dungeon. You can't get back out. You've got to like make your way through back to the entrance of the dungeon. And really soon, so you're probably still a low level party because I think it's a level like 4 or 5 start, and so you're not very high level. You you get out of this first room that you're in, and it's like 2 rooms away. There's these big double doors. You can actually just see through them, and you can see like a sarcophagus and like an axe that if the players ask like what does the axe look like it's clearly magical. So there's fat loot in there. And so the
yeah, yeah.
players of course are going yeah cool, and the module tells you if somebody looks carefully they can see a chain at the top, and that's all. That's the whole hint. Um, Players try to open the door. The chain is of course a trap.
Yeah.
It's rigged to the door so that if anyone pushes it open, it will drop a glass orb filled with a magical sleeping potion. Magical, so
Yeah.
elvish resistance to sleep does not affect this,
Mm.
because it's magical sleep. And yeah, that it as soon as the glass breaks, it expands at a set rate of I can't remember how much. It's like 30 feet per round or something like that, or
Okay.
maybe 60 feet per round. And
Damn.
it's a magical sleeping potion that puts whoever it comes in contact with asleep for 5,000 years.
Yeah. No, I have run that, and I got rid
It's
of it.
insanity because my players all got hit by it.
Yeah.
Um, and because also like they had no reason at first to even think like they had to run away. They were like, okay, this is an ancient dungeon. Like the glass shatters, there's no immediate obvious effect, so they're just kind of like, oh, I guess it was just a dead trap. Um, and yeah, then they all fall asleep like 2 rounds later. And yeah, fortunately, that was like the first session of that module, and one player hadn't made it. So we came up with the way we got around it was we came up with like they're actually coming with a second like set of supplies on a separate caravan following up the party, and so they came in later, and at that point the gas had dissipated like a couple of days later, and they found this like cave in and they rappelled down, and on their way down their rope snapped so that they couldn't get back out either, and then they started looking around and eventually they found the rest of the party just snoozing away. Woke them all up, but it's just absolute insanity. But like it was so much fun, and everybody really enjoyed like that pit of despair of like, did we just TPK from opening a door?
Yeah. Like
And
the
then like
second door.
yeah, and then figuring out like a way around it, and yeah, and then they treated the rest of the dungeon so cautiously. Like they wouldn't walk down a corridor without like tapping every rock with a stick.
The 10-foot pole is something we dearly miss. Wizards, please, if you
Yeah,
could just give us it back, that'd be great.
yeah,
That'd be awesome.
oh yeah, yeah.
Great way to make anybody paranoid is to give them a 10-foot pole to tap on every nook and cranny they can.
Yep. I've got one player who I've played with a few times who, no matter what the scenario, they will always listen at the door before opening it.
Yeah.
Just in case there's something horrible behind it.
They've been burned. I can guarantee they've been burned.
That's right. Yep. They've been burned. Yep. They can't remember which door it was that burned them, but yeah,
There's always one.
yeah, that's the thing is so, D&D, you can have so much fun with it, and I don't want to just like badmouth it. Obviously, we're trying to do better than D&D. We want to give people more fun than D&D can give them because there are things that D&D is not good at, and that's fine because every game has that. And so, I guess the reality is that we want to think about like what are the experiences players want that D&D is not doing well for them, and how can we give them those experiences in a really fun and enjoyable way. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I wanted to actually, because I know you guys like obviously very familiar with D&D. There's a lot of like adjacent systems that like use 5e as a base, and I think that that might be the avenue that like a lot of people are using to like get forward or like make their system just adaptable and easy to pick up with like just
yeah,
people who know what how 5e works now. It's basically
Hmm.
like it's its own even though each iteration of D&D is its own system, like not many people are like really happy about going back to like fourth, or like not a lot of people
Yeah.
are sort of like going back to these other systems and seeing,
Mm.
you're seeing as much success as what 5 is doing, 5e or
Yeah.
2014, 2024, whatever you want to call it. So I guess having that built in house as well, you guys having the daring system means that you're able to sort of give that building block to other designers. Have you guys thought about like, making it like an open system for people to build from? Is that the intention there? I don't think I've ever
That
asked you
is,
that.
yeah, that is 100% the intention. Like, we would love it if somebody else had their own ideas for a daring system game. We this is a job on my list that I have not yet gotten to. But the disclaimer in the Those Who Dare book is that anybody is welcome to build upon it and publish their own stuff on top of it. And it'd be like, I need to delve into the legality of it, because I know there's actually like a bunch of different like categories of open game license and Creative Commons, and what you sort of legally delineate your game as is actually quite important. And I'm not a lawyer, so it's something that I need to find out how we can give people the ability to build on what we've built, without hindering them too much. Because yeah, we definitely want them to. We want people to be able to take the ball and run with it, basically. So I guess the way that I would, the other game I've seen that does this, that I think I'd most want to emulate, is Blades in the Dark with Forged in the Dark, because Blades in the Dark is one of my favorite systems, and yeah, I've played a couple of really good Forged in the Dark alternative systems, which it's just such a good platform to build on top of. And yeah, daring system, we would ideally like, we have thought about this, about like what would it take for someone else to build a daring system game, and like fundamentally the only things that you'd really need to build mechanically are what skills and perks are available, because then beyond that, the underlying system, I think, handles everything else. And that might also mean that you need to make some of your own action cards, but that is, it's not a high bar for people to go. If you went like, no, I want to play like, whatever, like I wanted to play the daring system, but using Forgotten Realms or something like that, and so I want to like convert a bunch of D&D spells into like unique action cards that people can learn to use or something. Like, you could do that, and that'd be really cool, I feel like. So
Yeah, that would be the crossover potential. I think is really good, and like you said, it's really it's the things that the players are interacting with that change up, and they just sort of get derived from the narrative, like the flesh you sort of put onto the skin, the bones of
yeah,
the daring system there, and would
yeah,
make like creating those things extremely easy, especially if you're building a game about it, you probably have a good idea of the subject matter. So like
mm,
you've already sort of
yeah,
like pre-thought what those things are. Yeah,
yeah,
I think it's great. I mean, I think the only
yeah,
thing that would maybe not translate to every system or every game might be the ending system, as far as like
mm,
transitioning to like a different space or time or
yeah,
something like that. But definitely for
yeah,
like retiring characters and all that, like absolutely would
mm,
be an excellent way to sort of keep that ball rolling in like those high impact, whether it's like a high impact combat game or like a political game that has like people getting taken out of office, or like corporate espionage. Like there's all these things that allow it to make that in and out of characters and players very flexible. So yeah, I'm excited to see what happens there, because yeah, I'll gush for ages
yeah.
about the daring system, guys. So yeah, we'll don't worry,
I
well, maybe
appreciate it. No, well, yeah, no, we definitely wanted it to be really accessible and versatile, because yeah, like as we sort of touched on earlier, it's nice when you can sort of pull and push mechanics as needed. So this was something that we wanted to do for the Founders Edition, but we just did not have the bandwidth to get to it. But we do have for First Edition planned a bunch of like modular add-on rule sets.
yeah,
So, if you wanted your game to be more like survival heavy, you can like plug in an extra rule set, and then it's got all of that ready for you. Or if you were wanting to play like a really like political intrigue, like spy thriller or something, we have thought about like what are some extra like social and political mechanics that we could just plug into this to give you that like depth of this is all going on. But as a base, like I think one of the things that we were really proud of when building Those Who Dare was that the social encounters, the showdowns, are just as deep as the combat encounters. So you don't need to play with any combat. You could already play with a game that's like entirely just social, and there is a way for you to get into like when you get into like a debate or an argument, like there's a full rule set behind how you'll go through and resolve that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of those. I really look forward to having the time to sink my teeth into creating something interesting with the system. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'm just excited to see where it goes because creative, and that's why I've been really keeping an eye on like the Discord space. There's a lot of people in your space that are very active as well about how they want to use the system and how they build it for
Yeah.
themselves, even for just the one like you know setting book that you've kind of just thrown on top of it, which is yeah, it's
Mhm.
very exciting. So anyone out there who wants to try and see some of honestly a super creative community in there, check out the guys. We'll have all the links in the social in the description down below when we're done here today. Go check it out. I think it's yeah a great place for bringing out some really interesting and innovative ideas.
Yeah, no, and that is what we're trying to build. Like, it's definitely not a secret that like as a couple of introverted game and history nerds, connecting with people is so hard for us. And as you know, like we hired a marketing consultant for the month of April last month to help us out with that. And yeah, like we're investing a lot of energy into that, into our Discord server. We are really active on there. We're responding to questions. It's great to have people joining our Discord and like asking us about the game, sharing with us like the scenarios that they're going to run. See, like there was someone talking us through how they're homebrewing their setting for adding in fantasy elements the other day, which was really interesting to hear because at some point we're going to do a full fantasy um, daring system game. But right now, that definitely still feels a long way up because we got Miskatonic, which is, it is fantastical, but it's Lovecraftian fantasy. So no one's going to be slinging fireballs.
Yeah.
Um, you're just going to lose your mind instead. And yeah, we do have some other ideas for daring system games, but the um, we've got one which is another historic daring system game which focuses in on the history of Melbourne during the Gold Rush and then the Great Depression, and so that's sort of like us going really deep into our nerddom of like what can we tell people about like where we're from in our game, and really like share that experience with people, which I'm looking forward to doing eventually. And the other one that we've thought about is it's Those Who Dare adjacent, but it's rather than historic fiction, it's mythological fiction. And so
Ooh, yep.
it leans completely into the idea that like the mythologies are all real. You've got the Norse pantheon, you've got the Greek pantheon, the Roman pantheon, the Egyptian pantheon, the Sumerian pantheon, and like so with the idea there is sort of like we're still skirting history, but the fiction of history rather than the realism of history. And so yeah, like letting people play through those that historic lore. You could play a game where you can meet Hercules, or you can play a game where if you if you slaughter the most people during your raids, like Odin will smile on you and you'll gain blessings or something. So yeah, still historic, and so both fantastical. Sorry, that one fantastical, but still not that sort of like that same sort of like D&D-esque like medieval fantasy that is very popular. So someday,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it's on the long list of things to develop. Like I understand.
yeah,
I
that's it.
understand.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about the cycle of designing because there's a lot of people out there that it's either their first time creating or maybe this is helping inspire them to like be like yeah, making games is difficult but not as hard as I thought it was. So
Hmm.
if you could water it down to like before you decided to be like yeah, we're going on to like GameFound, we're getting this thing funded, like how did you know, what were the things that you were like yeah, wait, this is ready to go?
So it's that's a tricky question because if the question is how did we do it before GameFound, the answer to that is very different to how do we do it now that we've launched one product successfully.
Okay.
Because yeah, our first time we were muddling through it. Like we didn't have a defined design process. We didn't know all the steps. And because I've backed a lot of Kickstarters and game founds over the years, and I've seen a lot of disaster stories where someone's had a really cool idea for a game or any, crowdfunded product, and they've successfully crowdfunded, and then they've ended up bankrupt or, $100,000 in the hole or something just because they didn't know. And so they launched a really successful product that then, they then learned down the track, like shipping's how much, or, like I didn't account for this or that thing, or, and so we didn't do any advertising for our release of Those Who Dare on GameFound. We wanted to sell enough that it would justify a small production run, but we didn't want to sell so much that we were going to get buried in the results. And we got to learn a lot out of that process, which is great. And we also got a lot of assistance along the way from various people in the Australian roleplay community, ARC, which I can't talk up enough. That is a tremendous resource if you happen to be in Australia or just feel like joining their Discord. Like there's heaps of people on there who are happy to answer questions about game design. But so our first experience, we really just, Tom had already done quite a bit of dev on Those Who Dare, and I was highly aware of the dev already since I'd already helped playtest. I'd given a lot of feedback over the years. So when we started to work on it together, our first steps were we sort of just took it section by section and started asking questions about things that, like a lot of it Tom had been sort of like muddling with for a while. But once we decided to fully collaborate on it, we started going, all right, is this a D20 system or is this a D6 system? Because it started as a D20 system, as a D&D adaptation, and he tried it as both. And so, we really evaluated the merits. We played some other games that were D6 and some D20 games, and we made a decision. We went, all right, which one of these delivers better what we want people to experience out of it? And so we had that benefit of having a clear, like, this is our design philosophy of player experiences, where we're working from. That is, okay, first of all, how do we want people to feel while they're playing this game and after they've just played this game? And then we work backwards from there, which is a great way to do it. I would suggest that player experience should be your first port of call when you're thinking about how you're designing your game. But post our first crowdfunding campaign, now our process is, I would say, we're still learning our process, and they're just like making Nothing Left, this party card game. We realized like a lot of the things that we were doing with Those Who Dare just didn't work for this game, or there were things that this game needed that we never needed to do for Those Who Dare that we now needed to think about. And so one of the things that we learned from Pirate Software, who's a very popular YouTuber and Twitch streamer, and talks a lot about encouraging people to make video games. And so, like, one of the things that they suggest as a starting point is to make a game design document, and they have a sample game design document on their resource website, which I pulled and I went through, and I was like, oh my god, we should have had this from day one for Those Who Dare. Like, yeah, you should start with a single document, and that's a living document. It's going to evolve because the design process will make you rethink some of the things you thought on day one about how you're making this game. But yeah, like you start by setting out, so all right, what is the game that we're going to make? What are we trying to make? And you want to give it a working title if you don't already know the title, and that can be literally anything. You can call it Project Pineapple, you can call it the game about people crying, whatever you want. And then you should, like, what we do is we go, all right, what is the like synopsis of what we're trying to achieve with this game? That's where you write out, what is your fundamental concept? So with the example of Nothing Left, which was the first game design document we made, I went, okay, well, I want a game that basically makes fun of existential dread. Like, there's so many things in the world today for us to cry about, and so I want a game which just throws all of them in your face, and it's just up to you to try and cope as best you can. And I didn't know how the mechanics of the game were going to work yet, but I knew that was the experience that I wanted people to have, is I wanted them to relate too much to what was the cards that were coming out, so that they went, the only thing I can do is laugh about this because
Yep.
otherwise I'd cry. Um, and so from there, I went, okay, well, what are some other similar games in the space that we can use as like reference points? And went, all right, well, it's a party card game as synonymous as D&D is. First game we talk about is Cards Against Humanity.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people love it, a lot of people hate it, a lot of people are just sick of it. That's fine, but it's impossible to ignore that sort of like they created the prompt and response card game style that is used so commonly today. And then I thought, you know, okay, well, I want this to be a bit more freeform than that. And so I thought about, you know, games like Super Fight and a couple of other things. And then we looked at, you know, is there an artistic style? And I thought, like, for me, Nothing Left But to Cry sort of suggests that sort of like mid-century 1950s, everything is like dressed up to be perfect, even though it's not. And so that got us onto an art style that we could use, and that helped then inform the theme. So, you know, it's going through that process of making a game design document is invaluable. The game design document also should set out a timeline of like, you know, when are you going to be, like for us, the timeline for that was we went, okay, well, when do we want a first prototype done? Because that's what we need to do to start playtesting. And it doesn't matter if that's an absolute turd of a prototype, you know, you need a starting point and then play it with some people. Doesn't matter if they're friends and family, so long as, you know, they're going to give you constructive feedback, and get them to tell, you know, did you like it? Did you hate it? Like, what didn't you like? Did it work? Like, it wasn't until we started playing the game with various people that I started to go, this game doesn't have a good ending. And that was one of the problems that we had was I thought that it would be fun for the game to not really have a specific ending. And part of that was because, you know, the way people use Cards Against Humanity is technically Cards Against Humanity ends when somebody wins, I think it's 5 rounds or something. But nobody plays it like that.
Nah.
People just play till they're sick of playing it.
Yeah, that's
and so that was
it,
yeah, exactly. It's like with Uno, you know, technically there's an end of Uno as well. You just play as long as it's fun. You know. And so I thought like an ending isn't important to this game. But it was only once I started sitting down and playing with people that I realized, like, no, this game does need an ending. It needs a distinctive ending. And so I decided, okay, no, you play to a set number of crises, and that's the game. So, you know, so much of it you will only learn in reaction to seeing it being played. And then beyond that, like, your design process, it's nice to have some consistency to it. Like, one of the things that Tom and I have had to learn as a pair making games, which if you're a solo dev, you won't have to worry about this, but a lot of people are making games in collaboration with other people. The delineation of roles that we came up with for Those Who Dared weren't so useful for Nothing Left, because the game was my idea and it was a much smaller game. There wasn't enough game for us to both be fully involved on. And that started out as a problem because, you know, I had a semi-clear idea of how I wanted this game to go. And then, you know, it wasn't a couple of workshops in where, you know, we clearly had different ideas about a game. And so we went, but unlike with Those Who Dare, where we could go, okay, well, you know, why don't I work on this part of the game and Tom, you can work on that part of the game, and then we can review each other's work. With Nothing Left, it was like, there's not enough game for us to do that. You know, it's not possible for us to carve out these spaces and then like do sort of like a crossover. So instead we went, okay, well, you know, Tom's got the PhD, so I'll just lead the design on this one, and then Tom can review what I've done. That's all great. But yeah, like you know, it's important to have delineated like who's responsible for what, and that's both like who is the main creative direction coming from in an area, but also like who's driving that area. And yeah, so I think it's really critically important when you're trying to like start out to go, okay, even if you're doing it solo, you should be doing this on like a time basis of like, you know, okay, this week or this month or whatever, I'm figuring this out. I'm getting this to a working state. It doesn't need to be good. It doesn't need to be the final version of it. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be working so that I can put it in front of some other people and play that. And then from there, you just keep setting yourself, okay, now I'm going to work on this part and I'm going to work on that part. So you're going to go back and rework pretty much the whole thing over time anyway. But you just need to start setting yourself like, this needs to get done and this is the time frame I'm going to do this in. And then once that's done, you move on and work on another piece.
It reminds me so much of, and there's a lot of tech people who work in the IT industry, they're going to hate the words that come out of my mouth right now, but disclaimer, this methodology, I think, exclusively is for projects and developing software as a service, as whatever, developing software. It's the agile system of like having iterative, small and like minimum viable products, minimum viable games, whatever you want to call it, and just always having them out with someone, whether it's like your first thing and then you're testing it, taking the feedback, iterating, and sort of not getting stuck in that like analysis paralysis of like, I have 10 months, I'll make the whole game, and then I'll figure out afterwards, after I'm invested into all these pillars that support each other, and if one of them comes tumbling down, everything else falls around it. I think that's one of those pitfalls that even I think, knowing a lot about that methodology, having studied at uni and then, employing it across a couple of different professions that I've done, I think that's sort of it's a very good creative tool or mindset to be in. So yeah, anyone out there who gets a little bit stuck or think they might be too far down the rabbit hole, go check out some of the agile systems and just how the mentality, how they structure putting deliverables out, which is going to be like playtest 1, 2, 30. So great way to think about getting that feedback, getting the direction before you're too far down the path. So
I think it's also really helpful to like think about humans in terms of how we function. And I think like a big part of the reason why that approach is effective is because you need to think about like what's realistic for you as a human. Like people don't conceptualize long-term periods very well. And so if you think about, over the course of like, Those Who Dare was like a 5-6 year project. If you'd started on day one and just like sort of tried to perceive it as a single task, then we never would have gotten anything done. We just would have like, and even if we'd sort of like been chipping away at it, we would have become demotivated and demoralized because it would feel like we weren't making enough progress. So you have to break it down into its constituent components. And then you also need to be ready for like that iterative approach of, I need like, look, it would be great if I could build the whole house in a single go, but what if instead I just build this floor first and then I check that the floor works the way that it's meant to, because that then gives you that feedback of, you'll get that response, which will give you more to work on next. It'll inform your next steps. But it's also really important to get that positive feedback, like when I first sat down with people and played Nothing Left with them, it was really, it's a big morale booster. You need that period of people going, oh, this was so much fun. Like, I mean, at the Tabletop Open Day we were at last week, it was our first time demoing the final prototype version, which we now consider development to be basically like 95% done. There's some polishing and balancing to do, but like the game is fully functional and people enjoy it. Man, it was so good playing it with, 30 or so people on that open day and having so many of them being like, that was so much fun. Can I buy a coffee? It's like, you need those responses. And yeah, without that, it's easy to just like get bogged down and lost in the process of, you lose that momentum. So you gotta.
Yeah, go, please. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say you gotta chart a course that like lets you get what you need as a human along the way. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Halfway through when you started speaking, before you mentioned it, I was like, I had that epiphany of like, there's also the positive reinforcement that comes from like that. And I don't mean all creatives, but a lot of creatives have that thing of like wanting to make the perfect thing or the thing that brings that level of joy, especially when creating a game. Like it's designed to bring people together, have fun, and it's a positive experience. So like having those like breadcrumb positive like affirmations through like your design process, so you can be sure it's fun. people are enjoying XYZ. When you're up till like 4 a.m. looking at like how you structure your rules, how you do mechanics like that, you're not having that experience there because it's yours. You know how it works. But having that as a fresh experience and then getting a
Yep.
real genuine feedback to it and it being a positive thing, which a lot of them are. Like every playtest I've been to, I've always had something positive to say. And there's always constructive stuff that could be like, I know with I can't even think of what I said about uh cry. Oh man, I no can't think of it, but I'm sure there was something there that I was like,
Yeah.
because we talked about it for like maybe 15, 20 minutes and I had a great time. It's my type of humor, which is like that made it a
Yeah.
little bit easier to like shoot on straight in for me. But
Yeah.
there's that thing there that, and I saw it as well when you, I think, because I started on the other side and I was just checking out when people were there and I saw you with a big grin on your face. Maybe it might have been like the second or third game of the day. And I'm like, okay, yeah, something magical's happening over there. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So get through, design your game. I'm glad you learned and took things from your first time to this time and then obviously going
Yeah.
into the future as well.
Mm.
The next step. So you got to get something out there. Game's got to get made some way or another. You
Yep.
guys went to GameFound for those who
We
dare.
did.
So
Yep.
we'll start with GameFound, and then we'll
Mhm.
might circle out a little bit to look at crowdfunding as a whole. But how'd you experience it? I've heard nothing but good things about what GameFound do for like new creatives and people putting campaigns together, because not everyone has a great idea of how to do it. But tell us about your
Yep.
experience there.
Yeah, well, it was definitely positive. We part of our decision to go with GameFound was because I'm a big fan of Awaken Realms, the board game company who set up GameFound. Um, I've got several of their games here on my shelves and have gotten so much enjoyment out of them. So I was already a little bit predisposed towards GameFound. GameFound also, some of the other fundamentals are like they have a pledge manager built into their platform. Um, so what you get from going with GameFound, you've like it's one system that's doing a lot more than say we're now going to use Kickstarter like D&D because it's the monolith of this industry. But yeah, like Kickstarter, you need another platform for your pledge manager. That could be BackerKit, that could be GameFound because you can use them just as a pledge manager. There's a couple others out there. Some people manage it without a pledge manager instead. If you've got a small campaign or if you are like a god of organization, you could manage all of it through your own, Google Workspace or something like that.
Please no.
Man, that would be, I wouldn't want to do it though.
No,
So
no
yeah,
chance.
we went with GameFound and the experience was really good. So having built a Kickstarter campaign at this point as well, but I hadn't at the time. But the comparison I'll make now is that GameFound, you build your campaign, you set it up, and then you submit it to GameFound, and that's the same process as Kickstarter. You create a new project and you get access to sort of the campaign builder. You do it. The big difference between the two, as far as building your campaign goes, though, when you submit a new campaign to Kickstarter, it's just an algorithm or an AI that checks it and approves it immediately. So you immediately know, like, my campaign is ready to go live. I don't know what process it's running through on the back end, but it is like straight away. So I think that it's basically just like is there any inappropriate content or anything that's like overtly illegal that we can check for quickly and through an automated system, and then you're good to go. GameFound, it goes to a human. And it's a human who actually goes through your campaign and then will give you suggestions. They gave us suggestions. They gave us a list of feedback about that. They said, your campaign, you can launch it like this if you want, but here's a list of things that I could suggest that's going to help your campaign out. And so we went through and we actioned all of them because of course we did. Like,
Yeah, why would you not?
if we were, if we were on our 10th launch or something like that, and we had in-house designers and whatnot, if we had campaign managers, then maybe we'd be like, no, we have reasons why we built it the way we built it. When you're an indie studio or just like an independent creator, it's crowdfunding is a skill, and we didn't know how to do it. And most people don't know how they're gonna do it, how to do it before they actually do it. There's a lot of information out there, but I was skeptical of most of it because a lot of it is really self-reinforcing information. Like if you
Okay.
Google things like what time of year do I launch my project, or what
Oh,
day of the week do I launch my project, or you know, the information you'll get, you will get lengthy articles by supposed industry experts, and what they'll tell you is based on what everybody's doing. So,
mm,
if you Google like what day of the week do I launch on, I'm pretty sure like it's quite a large margin that the most popular day of the week is Thursday. And the problem though is that it's not telling you is there a reason why they all launch on Thursday? It's telling you they are all launching on Thursday.
yeah.
So is that because everybody likes getting their wallet out on Thursday, or is it just because everybody's looked at this article and goes, okay, Thursday is the best day to launch, so let's
Yeah.
all launch on Thursday?
Yeah.
And if you're a small, if you're doing a small scale campaign like we were, do you want to be on the same day that Awaken Realms is launching their projects?
Probably
I
not.
don't, because
No.
yeah, I mean, there's only so much space on those front pages or the tops of the lists of categories on any crowdfunding platform. And if you're launching on the same day as everybody else, like we ended up going to Tuesday, I think it was, and because it was our only campaign so far, I can't say how much it did or didn't help us, but like at the very least, there's a lot of like having some feedback from GameFound was helpful because they were able to talk to us about, like one of the things they suggested was they suggested we have an activated stretch pay, which is their like, a payment installation plan system that's built into their platform. And they suggested, you should turn on stretch pay. And I came back and I said to them, well, look, the reason I didn't switch it on myself to start with was because like here in Australia, there's been a lot of scrutiny over those like payment installment plans
Yep.
that
Yep.
like a lot of people are experiencing financial distress because of these like oh no, you don't have to pay for your new lawnmower today, you can pay for it over the next 4 months in 4 installments, but it encourages people to make irresponsible purchases. And so I came back and said, do you have any like data that you can share with me about like what are the rates that people fail to make their payments?
Mm,
And then also, can you show me that switching on stretch pay actually results in more backers? So, if it's just the same backers with or without, but some will choose to spread out their payments, and some, like if you're going to have 100 backers either way, but stretch pay just means the payments come through differently, then okay, well, it's not really giving us anything more. But
yeah.
if stretch pay has shown that like campaigns with stretch pay consistently do, higher, like more backers total, and it doesn't look like a lot of people are defaulting on the payments. And what he came back with was like they could show that yes, he did send me some data and showed me that yeah, like I think off the top of my head it was something like a 3% bump in backers, which had we been running a bigger campaign, I probably would have said, okay, that's good. And he didn't share information with me about payment defaults either. So
Yeah. Yeah.
based on that, I was like, all right, so there is an incentive to do it. I don't know if it's going to have any kind of like ethical conundrums behind it. So for us, where our target was only $3,000 and we raised about 4.5, I was like, you know what, 3% isn't going to make a difference for us.
No, it's not.
Like that might be one extra sale, and that's not like if we were doing $100,000 campaign, yeah, I want that extra $3,000.
Yeah, sure.
But at our scale, it was like this was our test run. This was us having run through. Our goal was run through a crowdfunding campaign, figure out how that works, then have to deliver like get a product manufactured and then deliver that product. We wanted to run through that whole. I knew that was fraught with pitfalls, and it was. Plenty of things went wrong during that time, and fortunately, though, we were kind of like, if we're only delivering, $3,000 worth of goods or $4,500 worth of goods, even if everything went wrong and they all ended up in the sea and we had to get them reprinted at a higher cost and ship them all to everybody, we'll be okay. But if you run a campaign, you've raised $50,000 and everything went wrong like that, you could be in a really difficult situation.
Oh, yeah.
Like that could be the end of your fledgling indie studio. So yeah, I think it was a really good decision to try for like a really soft launch to start with, just so that we could have run through that whole process. You know, we mapped out everything that we did. We figured out like what were the major mistakes that we made. And yeah, that was very helpful. And so to circle back, yeah, GameFound was very helpful in that crowdfunding stage of like helping us know what was actually going to work, what was going to help us connect with an audience. And their feedback was really constructive and useful. And then they did check back in with us a couple of times. The other big thing that they did for us was that even though we were absolute nobodies who'd never launched a campaign before, they put us in their rotating top banner of the page for like the first week of our campaign, which was, you know, that's like that. They would have given us more total viewers than we achieved for ourselves, for sure.
Yeah.
So you know that was pretty nice of them, and they still do things like that. You have like they also have their own in-house advertising service, which we didn't use because we weren't really thinking about advertising yet, and we didn't want to sell a lot of games at that point. But they do have AdFound, so in addition to being a pledge manager, they can also handle some advertising for you. But I haven't used that service, so I can't say how good or bad it is. But you know, if you're looking for a one-stop shop, GameFound is offering a lot more than Kickstarter is.
Yeah. With the research that we've done, myself mostly have done in like finding, especially when we were finding our feet with Indieverse, there is like such a huge proportion of designers, creatives that are just using that Kickstarter. And even just as like someone who is there just trying to get information on how people were funding things, how successful campaigns were, just like all that sort of data at a glance, I think that GameFound is such an exceptional system at like just giving you everything that you need to sort of look at a designer, whether you're a consumer, like, can I trust this person? Is it their first thing? Is there any like bad press or anything that goes around the space, to just like to us who are, you know, trying to find an independent, like a giant group of independent designers to approach and be like, hey, we've got something amazing that we can offer you. I think that GameFound is that unsung hero that I hope that more people jump onto, because I've heard nothing, like I said, heard nothing less than an amazing experience from designers that have used it.
Yeah, it's a very responsive platform too. Like we had somebody that we could contact directly, like an individual that's still our like contact person there at GameFound, and even like we're changing conditions, they're quick to respond to. So like when the tariff war started up, it was pretty quick that we got an email from them saying like, hey, we're building a new functionality so that you can account for tariffs in your campaigns. We're building in a calculator so you can work out how it's going to impact you within our platform, and then it'll give you that functionality to, you know, if there's obviously in this case it's America, but they just built in this functionality, you know, if there's a particular region that has high additional costs compared to other reasons, like you'll have that functionality to go, okay, well then, you know, in this case, like say US backers, there's a US surcharge, so it lets you like regionalize those extra costs, and that's really good, you know. They rolled that out like within like 2 or 3 weeks. They had the function live on their website, which was really cool. And then I think like a week afterwards, they did go back and tweak some of it. But yeah, like quick to respond. I don't know if Kickstarter has done anything similar, but I haven't heard anything from Kickstarter, and I have a pre-campaign live on their platform right now, and I haven't heard a thing out of them about like, are we going to do anything to help you with tariffs? So yeah, it's also that like, you know, there's clearly people at GameFound whose job it is to look at what common challenges are there out in the world right now for like people running crowdfunding campaigns, and how can we help them with it, which is nice. You know, it's good to like, they have a lot more expertise than we do, so it's really nice that they're thinking about this and looking at ways that they can help out.
I think that the thing that makes them way more, it's just better sit for them than something like Kickstarter, is the fact that they built their platform to to sell games, to crowdfund games, tabletop games of all sorts. So it's a lot easier for them to be laser focused on the challenges that their you know, their cohort, the people that they're going to be supporting, like that they face. So I think that is a really good piece, so that they can be that like expert in the field as to like what happens. They've seen it 100 times in like the same setting, so they understand it way better than as a first-time campaign runner that you ever would have, unless you spent
Yep.
hours or years of your life, you know, going around and just like looking at all the variables and that from other people's mistakes, horror stories, and all that. That's amazing. Yeah, big fan, big fan.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's been pretty good. Yeah, they've been very helpful. I'm looking forward to using them again. We are going to use Kickstarter for Nothing Left. Partly because in this, like, now we know a lot more about what's going on, and partly as well because Nothing Left is meant to be a broad appeal game, whereas Those Who Dare was a specialist game. Like, I didn't expect, you know, even if it was on Kickstarter, I wasn't expecting random people browsing the website to spontaneously find our game and also happen to be interested in a historic fiction role-playing game. That would have been, you know, that's a real unlikely event. Whereas Nothing Left is designed for, you know, anyone. You know, it'll be a fairly cheap game. We're expecting it to be about $40, and you know, so it's not a big financial commitment. And if you would like to laugh at the existential dread of everyday life, it's a game for you, which I feel like that's most people. So, you know, the two platforms offer very different things. Like you can't ignore the fact that Kickstarter has just this enormous customer base of people who are visiting it, checking out games, and who find games through other games on Kickstarter, that kind of thing. So, you know, that has a lot of value to it. But if you're starting out and you're not trying to like in our case, if you're not trying to sell $100,000 game as your first try, GameFound, I think, offered us a lot more value than Kickstarter did. And similarly, other sort of more niche style games, I would stick with GameFound over Kickstarter because, yeah, if I'm going to have to drive most of the traffic to that campaign through good marketing and connecting with the right people, rather than just relying on any average person walking by as that could be the right person, then yeah, like there's not much advantage to Kickstarter over GameFound in that scenario.
Wow. Your niches, guys, with weirds and wonderfuls that aren't sitting in there. Try them out. Like, I think that's a glowing review for something that I would call extremely niche. Like, at the core, very niche game. And I'm not much of a history off, but I was just excited by the system itself. But so, for you guys as a design house, and I guess talking about like there's other design studios and that you've interacted with, how much benefit do you see crowdfunding having for you and other new indie designers?
Yeah, so crowdfunding, it's interesting. I feel like the entire concept of crowdfunding has been this ever-changing thing since Kickstarter first started up, and it's hard to know that like how I might define it today, whether that will still ring true in a year. But I think it has settled into crowdfunding these days is mostly just a pre-order system. I think that's how most people are using it. A lot of the things that were pitfalls of crowdfunding are getting less common and less attractive. Things like stretch goals, a lot fewer campaigns have them, and apparently they're falling off as like a reason why people would back things on crowdfunding. Exclusives, definitely still a big part of it. Getting, you know, your Kickstarter exclusive is a big decision maker for a lot of people. But yeah, the idea that your crowdfunding is making a project happen that was never going to happen otherwise is less of a thing, at least when talking about tabletop games. Instead, what it did for us and what it will continue to do for us is that we know we have a viable number of units to sell before we place an order with a manufacturer. And that's the whole equation. And if you're at a small scale, you may well not have a good reason to go with crowdfunding, because especially in the role-playing game space, print-on-demand services are quite competitive. So are things like, you know, you've got DriveThruRPG, you've got itch.io, you've got, you know, Lulu, you've got Ingram Spark. Like, if all you're putting out there is a book, there's a lot of services where you don't need to deal with manufacturing in advance. Instead, you just put a file with a platform, and they, somebody orders a copy of your book, they print it, they send it out. You definitely get better margins by having a manufacturing run with a professional printer, particularly at the moment in China, which is what we went with. And that was substantially cheaper per unit than using a print-on-demand service. And so we didn't know what we were going to go with when we crowdfunded, though. And we basically went, okay, well, we can't do a print run of less than about 500 copies. Anything less than that, and the price per unit goes pretty crazy. And so we sold about 50. And so it would be against traditional advice to go ahead and order 500 copies off of 50 sales. But because we'd also targeted this really small scale, the way that we approached it was, we thought we're not going to worry about whether we have, if we're overproducing for this game right now. What our approach was, if the total sales value would cover 500 copies, then we'll go with a manufacturer and we'll get the 500 copies. I have a storage unit. We can keep them there. And then, rather than paying, it would have cost in the area about 3 to 4 times the manufacturing cost per unit to go print on demand. So we got really strong savings by going with a manufacturer. And so we went, you know what, 500, even if it took us, 5 years to sell them all, we're still going to have made thousands of extra dollars over if we'd gone with a print on demand service. So for us, we crowdfunded. We did hit a point where, we knew that to get those made, it was going to cost about $3,500, I think it was, or 3.5 or 4. And so, we made about 4.5, and so we went, yep, cool. All right, well then let's get this, let's get it manufactured. And yeah, that turned out to be, I would say, a fairly good call, partly for us because we ended up working with a great manufacturing partner who's been amazing. But yeah, it set us up that then our game benefits from various accessories as well, which would have been really tricky to manage through a print-on-demand service because most of them just do printing. We might have been able to get the action card decks handled through something like DriveThruRPG. I'm not totally sure. But then for our game, we also, you can just print all the peripheral materials yourself at home if you want. We've got them all on our website, so you never have to buy more than just a PDF or a book. But, we have official action mats for you to play your cards on. We've got our own action decks. We've got our own collector's dice tins. So it was nice that we got that initial production run made because, then we could get a similar quantity of accessories made once we came out with the accessories later on, which was like the end of last year. Start of this year, yeah. So yeah, it was... really, but to circle back, so crowdfunding let us do that. Like, if we hadn't known that we had $4,500 in sales already, then we probably would have just put it up on DriveThruRPG. I think DriveThruRPG has improved their margins since we were looking at them in mid 2023, which is when we were looking at placing our mid last year when we were placing our manufacturing run. Because they at the time were about 30% or so, or 33% or something. They took like a full third. And that's a big chunk, like that's a lot out of it. And yeah, so we still don't list on DriveThruRPG. I believe that they did cut their margin a little bit. Maybe it's a quarter or something now. I haven't checked, but yeah, for us it was very much like, we can have our margins at less than 20% for manufacturing, which is where what we've learned is where it should be. We met a lot of other game creators, some very large ones at Spiel, which we went to last year, the game convention in Germany. And yeah, the number that we kept hearing from other people was like, your manufacturing shouldn't cost more than 20%, which is... So it's good to know that we were in the right ballpark with what we got made. And if we can scale up our games, then we'll get even better margins. But yeah, it's crowdfunding gives you that starting point so that you've got a starting figure that you can go, all right, I know I can make this much of my game. Whether that's just covering that set that you bought it in your crowdfunding, or whether it's like us ordering in advance in the hopes that we were going to manage to sell our game to a few hundred more people than we did in the initial crowdfunding. But yeah, it gives you that confidence of I know I've got this baseline of customers.
Yeah, I think that's something you don't get, well, you can't really get anywhere else. Like it's not something that you get when you go to a publisher or something like that. It's not where you go if you're like self-funding, then you might not even have any like intention from people outside of like maybe your friends and family, like, yeah, I'll buy this game. Like there's just not that avenue for it. So I think that you're right. For smaller independents, it's that great pre-buy. I want this. Yes, I'm willing to support this thing before I have it. Pre-order system, like definitely a good thing for those trying to find their niche or see if their idea is actually sellable.
Yeah, and it's not. It doesn't mean it's still the best way to go, because there's a lot of extra work involved in crowdfunding. Like you need to build a campaign, you need to be pushing that campaign. Nobody else is going to market it for you. So you've got to put the work in to get that campaign across the line. But if you're in the position that you have the time and resources to do that, then yeah, it's a really good idea. And that's why I think the entire industry runs on it. Very few game studios don't crowdfund. The only ones that don't are like Hasbro and Mattel. Basically everybody else crowdfunds, because why would you not use this established tool that all the customers are on, that goes, okay, I know this is what our initial interest is before we even put an order in with the manufacturer.
It's
really advantageous.
Oh yeah, it's a no-brainer. And some people would say, and had conversations with people who think that some of the bigger companies have used that fact as like a way to sort of hedge all their bets and stuff. And what it can do is push down a lot of the indie designers that are making new stuff, because they don't have those like 100, 200, 300, 500,000 campaigns, dollar campaigns that are like, dominating the top of the like most funded, which is how they present the majority of the campaigns when I first land on their page. So that's, I think, one of those pitfalls. Is there, if you were to give me like one pitfall, whether it's like from actually putting a crowdfunding campaign together to like its impact on you guys as indies or the indie industry as a whole, what would you say it is? The biggest detriment?
I think the biggest pitfall, and the reason for us it was a pitfall, is because it is something that we neglected for the first 2 years of starting up our studio completely, is that we didn't think about and we didn't know how important marketing is. And I don't like marketing. I'm an introvert. I'm a nerd. I'm autistic. I don't like selling things to people. I don't want to sell things to people. It's actually quite a barrier for me. And this is probably the thing that I really didn't realize, was that, it's easy to get caught up in thinking, if I make a good game, if I build it, the people will come. They won't. We were probably actually quite fortunate to get funded in that first campaign. Like, we did sell some to our friends and family, but our goal was $3,000, and more than $3,000 of our total funds raised were people we didn't know. So it was vindicating that we got across the line even without the copies our parents bought. But it's also nice to have that support. But what now in our third year, the start of this year was the start of our third year of operation as a studio. And this year we're now going, all right, we've got a product we've designed that we've got a lot of good feedback on. People who play it like it. We've got it manufactured, to a good quality. It feels nice. It looks nice. It's the margins are right, that we can make money if we can sell this product. The third leg of our stool is, though, that we don't have any customers. We've been going to conventions, which is great. We can sell at conventions. We can meet people at conventions. It's a lot of work for us, though, directly. And it's really finite as to how many people we can connect with by going to a convention or an open day or something. So we really like going to conventions. But we have needed to learn a lot about both the importance of and how to go about connecting with people. It's really outside of what we wanted to do when we decided like, hey, why don't we try and publish games? Probably the furthest thing from what we wanted to do like was to become salespeople basically, or
Yeah.
marketers.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so that is something that I think like this year there have been moments where I've been like, this isn't what I want to do. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this whole career path because that's how averse I am to marketing. Maybe this is going to destroy the whole experience for me. Um, we're all going to have moments of despair, you know, and so it has been really nice that we managed to tap into a really good marketing expert who's helped us out. Of course, we paid for that, but you know, someone who's been really informative and constructive in giving us like a month-long intensive crash course, basically to take us from being blind in the dark to actually having a direction and knowing something about what to do. But yeah, that's we had to do that. Like we would never have figured that out on our own, I don't think. And we probably would have failed as a studio if we hadn't at least cottoned under the fact that like our big barrier now is like how do we actually connect with more people out there in the world who might like our game, who are never going to hear about us unless we do something about it. And that's still really hard. Like we have taken our mailing list from like 25 at the start of last month to I think we're about 150 now or so, which is
Awesome.
great. That's it's really good growth. But the reality, this is another thing that I've been told by other people in the industry is like, if we want to be running crowdfunding campaigns that are going to let us pay ourselves at the end of them, the starting point is we need to have 1,500 contacts in our followers list, whether that's a mailing list, whether that's in our Discord server, whether that's, you know, following us on Facebook or wherever else one might be building their follower base. And so that's still, you know, that's 10 times where we're at right now. And it's probably going to take, you know, the rest of this year to try and build that up. And that's if we keep at it, which, you know, we're building better habits for that. But it's, yeah, I guess the thing of this being a pitfall is that it's not something that we saw coming at the start. And it is going to take up a lot of our time as the only two employees of our studio. Like, there's no one to handball it to. We both just need to every day be active, be promoting ourselves and what we've made, and that would kill it for a lot of people. So if I'd known that from day one, I probably wouldn't have started down this path. But now that we've already come so far, you know, it's I'm willing to do it in the hopes that we can grow our studio to be large enough that then I'll be able to handball it to somebody else. You know, first person we'd employ if we had the money to hire somebody would be, you know, basically a community manager and outreach manager. So someone who can be doing our posts and answering, you know, or staying active in our socials for us. So yeah, it's something that most people, I think, in this industry would question whether that's what they want to do.
Yeah. I've had this discussion with a couple of people in that you mentioned a lot, like having only two people means that, I mean, those two there is a great reflection of this. Like, you're only good at like a handful of things. Like, you have so limited out of like the skills that you can have as someone who works in a design studio. How do you like, that's the thing, like you can't be great at everything. So like, if there's like things you have to do, you have to get good at. Sometimes there are those things you just kind of like, well, I have to put on another hat, or, you know, I have to take a hat off so that I can make sure that we're out there getting more people. And you mentioned that there's massive communities in the crowdfunding space, which there are. It's huge, hundreds, thousands, millions of users buying, you know, new games every day, every month. God, every year. It's insane. It keeps going up as well, which is insane to me. The thing, I guess, that you highlight is like they're not. It's not like they don't want you to succeed after the fact, but they don't really equip you to deal with what comes afterwards. And like, outside of just going through it yourself and trying to like piecemeal together whatever it is you can after a campaign, like I think that's one of the things that I've always seen as like the pitfall for crowdfunding is like, their motivation for you crowdfunding is that you'll do it again, because that's how you grow. That's the avenue they give you, the people to help you do that part that you might not be so good at. But at the same time, you made something amazing. Like, if I had those who dare sitting on a shelf, you guys done your campaign and didn't go through this marketing track, you release your next game, but you've spent all this time, effort, and energy to make Those Who Dare, but where is it? Who's representing it? Who's buying? Who knows anything about it? Like trying to dig through a crowdfunding campaign, even going through you directly. If I found your thing, your profile page, I have to go through a bunch of steps to try and find what else you've made. It's not very good at showing support to existing products, which I think is a pitfall that not a lot of people really have. They're not thinking about it because there's so much to do with a crowdfunding campaign. So I think for me, that's the big thing that is, it's sort of like that detriment to the industry as well. It only sort of looks at itself as like it's people will be crowdfunding forever, and that's it's great for crowdfunding, and that's how it's become so successful. But there's not that. This is what we're sort of getting to now. It's like, what's the next step? So you guys talked about getting marketing on board and having someone give you the tools so that you can do all the steps that you need to grow your mailing list so your next campaign is good. But that's not where your vision is stopping. You're also thinking about now, outside of a campaign, growing your community in space, which is a really important piece to get, more success, more people, more eyeballs. And they say 1,500 people, but there's no guarantee that all of those 1,500 are going to buy. And depending on where you are and what kind of interactions you have, they might not even see the crowdfunding campaign. So having the tools to like in-house train and grow as a design house in popularity and just exposure of what you get out there is massively important. Massive.
Yeah, it's there's a big difference in having a cool idea for a game and even making that game and setting up a successful game studio that can, fund itself. And we're still not there yet, like I'm hopeful that this year will be our first year that we break even. And that's just on an annualized basis. It would still take 7 more years for us to, well, hopefully next year we'd actually be turning a profit and then can be, reinvesting in our products and our development or our marketing or whatever else we decide. And then it'll probably still be a few more years before we're, paying ourselves and recouping our initial investment that we've put in. So there's a long road there, and there's a lot of steps, as you say, that, a lot of people won't be aware of. And, that means that, we each wear every day. Tom and I each wear at least half a dozen hats. We both are game designers, but then, I typically write our copy for us. Tom typically does our graphic design, which is great that we have that synergy of skills there. But then, there's a lot of other things that you have to draw from. So I used to manage a bar as the back of house manager, and that turns out invaluable for knowing how to actually like run a small business. Like what do we actually there's so many regulatory steps just to setting up a business or a company. And so you need to register your business name. You've got to get in Australia, you got to get your ABN and your ACN. There's so many steps to that. These things need attention every year. They have costs associated with them. In our case, we have a storage unit that, fortunately, I was already renting a storage unit, so we just shifted it into the business's name, and we just keep my crap in one corner and all of our boxes of books in another corner. So that's okay. But there's a lot of stuff that's just the things you need to do to run a business. Like setting up our website has at times been quite difficult, as we've discussed about previously. Like there's sometimes you'll have the rug pulled out from under you by a completely unexpected source. Like we'd set up our website on Wix and we had our shipping set up through ShipStation, and now they've just decided that the starter level ShipStation subscription will no longer allow you to use their API. So we're no longer able to have live shipping rates come into our website. And so now we're trying to figure out an alternative shipping platform. The frustrating thing about it as well is the shipper that we use, the actual freight company we use, is Sendle. And Sendle can plug directly into Squarespace, where our website used to be hosted, but we shifted over to Wix for the better granularity of like managing our website. But they can't use Sendle, so you need an intermediary like ShipStation. It's there's just endless things that no one starts a business to manage connecting their shipping company with a shipping platform with a web store. You know, that was nobody's dream when they were growing up, but these things all have to be done. So, you know, I handle a lot of our admin. And then, you know, we each have our strengths in product development as well. We have our strength. Like, I actually think that Tom is better at running games than I am, but you know, so there's a lot of stuff that it's really helpful to have somebody else um, to play off your strengths. But even, you know, with that, there's still a bunch of stuff that neither of us are good at, and a whole lot of things we've just had to go, all right, one of us has to put this hat on, who's got the bandwidth to learn how to be this now.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, so a lot to be done, but it's also quite rewarding because, as you touched on as well, you know, why you get into it is a really big deal. You know, like I've worked in IT, I've worked in politics for a while, worked in a couple of other different fields, and yeah, for me, it was very much about, well, I love tabletop games. I love thinking about how tabletop games work, and I've got a bunch of ideas for tabletop games. So for me, it is very much about looping back to that player experience of like, can I put something on people's table that's going to make them feel something that I want them to feel? You know, I want them to feel enjoyment. I want them to feel like they're sharing a great experience with their friends. You know, I want them to feel like this is challenging to them. Like there's goals in player experience that I want to have people out there in the world feel. And there's also a lot of like poorly written or poorly designed games out there, and so we're still learning. We're going to make mistakes, but you know, it's my belief that if we can keep making games, we will be able to put really high quality games on people's tables. So you know, that's worth doing a whole bunch of these peripheral jobs for. So
I guess it's like good for giving yourself direction and knowing like, hey, I've done this. I understand how I want our business to move in that direction as well. So there's probably some benefit in chucking those hats on for the detriment that it obviously causes in like just having to juggle so many different responsibilities. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And some of them are unexpectedly enjoyable. Like I actually really like making spreadsheets, and so once we finally had enough data for me to like go through, and I last week I made a really big spreadsheet about tracking what we paid for all of the various products that we've ordered already, including the, you know, the actual conversion rates on the day that we paid for them. So working out, you know, this was actually what we paid in, this is what we're invoiced, this is what we paid in Australian dollars for all these different, we've had 5 total orders of various products so far. And then, you know, charting out, okay, well, this is the manufacturing cost. This is the manufacturing cost per unit. This is what the freight cost was, the freight cost per unit. This is what the you know, merchant fees will be when we sell a unit. This is what the sales tax in Australia, GST, and the EU, UK, you've got VAT. In the US, you've got tariffs. So you know, there's so many things to track. And building out a spreadsheet to track all of our costs. And all right, if we're charging this per unit, we can chart out exactly, okay, this is how much money we're going to make. Because that, as much as that was like a really big task to actually collate all that data and then arrange it and build out the formulas to be telling us, you know, you want to know like what is your cost per unit of all these different categories? What is your total cost per unit? What is your profit per unit? And you want that. You also need to know what the margins are. So, you know, what is the actual percentage that we're paying on that freight? What is the percentage out of this that we're paying on that? And that to me is like a key part of having a functional business. Like if you don't know that, then you don't know if you're making any money. You know, you don't know how much money you're making. So that's, you know, it's a necessary task, but it ended up actually being a lot of fun. I really liked building that spreadsheet. So pretty proud of it.
I tell you what, it's a skill that lots of people have. It's like a great analytical mind for like database building, spreadsheeting. So like if anything ever happens, you've also got a great thing to land back on. Hey, I love spreadsheets. I'm sure there'll be people out there that are very happy to let you do that all day.
Yeah, yep. There's something about it though when I'm charting out how much money I'm gonna make.
No, I see that part now. Yeah, okay, that makes a lot more
Yep.
sense. Oh.
Yep.
And we want to talk. The last thing I want to cycle on before I go to our
Yep.
try with everyone question is what happens afterwards. So there's a couple of avenues that a lot of people go to. Well, I think there's only a couple of avenues that we really can go to in like after you've got something in your hands, whether it's a book, whether it's a game, and it's like moving into the retail space. selling it yourself, like making your own website, going through that all the steps to do that, or finding one of these other online spaces like Etsy, the Amazons of the world. There's a whole bunch of slew of like smaller places to be selling games, whether it's like publishing houses and that, or on Indieverse, in case you haven't heard of us, where you're right there.
There's no shortage of platforms who'd like a cut of what we made.
Yeah. Absolutely. And like it's I think one of the things that gets me is like, what's obviously made a decision on like how you're going to do that. What were the things that went through your mind when you were deciding, one, how are we going to sell after we've done everything? We've got our 450 extra books. And there was another question there that I completely forgotten. So let's just start with the first one.
Yep. So then, yeah, sure. So yeah, we did sort of last year. We were just kind of muddling through it a little bit. We got the books around about the time of Spiel from the manufacturer, so we were able to sell at Spiel. We had an absolute nightmare situation though, because UPS lost the books we sent to Germany first, and then only Spiel is a 4-day event, and they found them on the second day. So we did get to sell for 2 days of Spiel, which was great. But and you know, just for anyone who's thinking about like what events are important to go to, you know, we sold about 40 copies through our crowdfunding campaign across the space of 30 days. At Spiel, we sold 30 copies in 2 days. And had we had stock the whole time, we did keep a record of everyone who asked to buy a copy, and we would have sold 70 copies in those 4 days had we had the stock there. So, you know, Spiel, really good place to go if you want to sell some stock. But yeah, so we now that we have the stock and we've been to a few conventions, obviously we did the crowdfunding. We did do sort of like a bit of a retrospective about what are all the ways we could make money, like what are the prospective revenue streams for us as a game studio, and we've identified 5 of them. We're not saying that we're going to be exploring all of them straight away, but crowdfunding is obviously a revenue stream for studios like us. We can launch a new game. You can re-crowdfund for a game you've already done. Nobody's saying you can't, you know, if you've already got the stock and you're saying, hey, back this game, like a lot of people look for games on Kickstarter, GamePound, etc., and that's where they discover them. So that is a potential revenue stream for us or any other studio. Another one is our own retail. So we have our own website. You can jump on friendsofthetable.com and buy a copy of our game right now. That is great. We love it when people do that. If you're in Melbourne, you can pick it up from us directly in the CBD, or you know, we can ship it out. Another one is us direct selling at conventions. So events are pretty good. Like this year so far, we've been to 3.5 events. Port Play got cancelled and said they did the open day. So, you know, it wasn't a convention, but it was still a day that people went along. 2 out of 3 of those events, we made more money than we spent. We actually made more than I was hoping for as well, which was great. So, you know, when you go to conventions, you're paying for exposure. You're in a room with a lot of people who are interested in games, you know, and we get to have chats with a lot of people who are interested in our product. Some of them buy the product. That's great. So we can make sales. We can make money there. And, you know, we potentially get more followers. We can build our audience, which is great. We love the events. The next one is retail partners. So people like Indiverse, you can jump on Indiverse right now and order a copy of those who dare, which is awesome. We spoke with 2 major retailers when we were at Spiel, and a couple of smaller retailers as well. And God, it is bad out there. What we learned was that most big retailers want 65%, and they pay you on consignment. And what that means, for those who aren't familiar with the inner workings of retailers, is consignment is where you give them the stock and they give you money when they sell the stock. So they don't pay you for the stock up front. And for a small studio, that is just a completely you know, we only have 500 copies. If say, you know, one of the people that we spoke to, who was really nice, he was a really nice guy, and he was actually really informative too, but he represented the largest retail network for tabletop games in North America, and he was actually in charge of sourcing role-playing games. He was like their head of role-playing games, and really cool guy, and really nice. Like he had a lot of good information for us because he's told us like if we were selling this game, I'm confident we could sell a few thousand of these. And I was like, that is amazing to hear. But then, when he's like, but we'll want 65% and we'll pay you on consignment, I'm like, well, all right, we don't have a few thousand copies to give you. I wouldn't even give you 50 copies because we only have 450 odd copies left. If we give you 50 of them, I know you're saying you could sell 2,000 of them, but how long will that take? Will a year later you go, here's your 48 copies back and your $50 of your share, that stock that we then couldn't sell for all that time. There's also a devil in the details of like, we'd have to pay for the shipping both ways to get it to them. And then if they tell us we can't sell it, then we also are responsible for the shipping back. So, retail is tough. And so it was great to meet you guys at CanCon. I think it was the first place we met. Yeah, because like retailing obviously is a good opportunity for a studio who, if you're not just doing if you're not just doing print on demand, you've got stock made and you want to sell it. Yeah, like having other people who are willing to sell your game for you or, put your game up on their store, that is worth a lot because, that's people that we weren't going to connect with. And yes, having retailers who are actually willing to talk about like fair margins, not just use their scale as like an excuse to, well, we get all the money because we've got 1,000 stores across North America or something like that. It's, like, well, that's great for you, but that's not necessarily going to help us.
Yeah.
So retail is the other one. And then the final revenue stream we've identified is Patreon. We have been thinking about ways to value add for those who dare, and we have a few things we'd like to do before we offer any, like, we can offer people professional accessories for an additional fee, but those are things that you don't have to pay anything more for. You can get those online and print them out yourselves. You don't have to pay us a cent more than getting your PDF. And we want the game to not require more input than just buying that PDF or book. And there's other things we'd like to do for value add before we start charging people. So we're not going to do Patreon yet. We want to have a free scenario module for every one of the 12 ages up on our website. So that's something that we are going to be working on over the course of this year for, getting content out there. So if you were someone who was thinking like, oh yeah, I think this game looks cool, we want you to have options for like something you can play without having to spend any more money. So to us, that's sort of like a baseline of how much content we want out there for those who dare before we're asking for more money. But we've got a lot of campaign ideas. And so we have thought about, we don't yet know how it would work, but we could do sort of a small digital only purchase system of you can buy individual modules for set price, like a $5 module or something like that. We might do it as a Patreon style subscription where if you join our like daring system actual like paid member tier, we might be able to do like, we can guarantee that we'll release a module a month or something like that, or I'm sure there's other rewards that we could come up with as well to actually incentivize that sort of thing. So there's a few things that we're thinking about. And for any studio, if you've got the kind of game that you can keep adding more content to, you can think about things like subscriptions or additional like digital only purchases. And then, otherwise crowdfunding, our own retail partners, if you can find a decent one like Indiverse, and events. You're very welcome. But that's pretty much it. Like that, the only other thing we can do to raise more money at this point is still just retail based. Is we do have some ideas for merch, but it's one of those things that like merch is tricky. I've run a Redbubble store in the past for a not-for-profit that I was associated with, and like Redbubble takes such a big cut. So like on-demand services for your t-shirts or your baseball caps or whatever, like you can't make a lot of money out of that. So if we were, and also you don't have so much control over the product because you don't see the product, it goes direct from a printer somewhere straight out to the customer. So we do want to do merch, but we want to do it correct. We want to do it right, have like nice quality product, not, the cheapest t-shirt you can get on Vistaprint with our logo stuck on it. We want something that, if you buy it, you'll be able to wear your Those Who Dare or Daring System t-shirt, for years to come without the colors running immediately or like the screen printing starting to disintegrate after the first wash. So yeah, very much something that's on our mind. But but that, I guess, to circle back to your question about how do we make money, like there's a heap of ways for a studio to make money, but the important thing is to like figure out which ones you're targeting, which ones are like you can get set up and actually do something with. If you had an uncle who worked at Good Games or Gameology or something, and they were like, oh yeah, we'll stock your game, and we'll only take a 10% or 20% cut or something, like, opportunities abound, but it's for those of us who don't win the lottery, you got to work at it and figure out what those avenues are and how you can actually get people to those places where they can find your product and buy it.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I think that's like having that multifaceted idea is like only means you've got like fallbacks, you've got options to look at when things like something goes to pieces, or if like you talked about the complications you've had recently with your website, having ShipStation do their fun thing of taking API access away, like having those things ready to go or in the background already ticking away is a great way to sort of keep the lights on and all that, just from multiple sources. All right, so our last thing, and I like to ask this of everybody, and this is for you personally. So this isn't about like the studio, about the game specifically, but so you started making this game specifically, Those Who Dare, about six or so years ago. If you could take a single piece of knowledge or a lesson learned and pluck it out of your brain and plant it into your brain from when the day you started, what would it be?
Good question.
Tricky, I know.
Yeah. I think something that was really quite late in development for what a big component of the game it is. So the thing is, the approach I'm going to take here is what would have saved us the most time.
Yeah, look, it's good. Yeah,
and the answer to that is I wish we'd switched to a D6 system years earlier. D6 is really mathematically much easier to give your players, like if you're going, on a D20, the player experience could be any of this, but on a D6 system, the player experience, you can narrow it down. I just want them to have this experience, or I just want them to have that experience. It's a lot easier for you to build around. And the other thing is, like, I know that we love D20s, but something that I've learned is that more fun than rolling a D20 is rolling a fistful of D6s. One of the things that our system does is it doesn't have any math at the table, so you never have to add numbers together. Instead, you're just looking for sixes or fives, and that's something that I learned from Free Leagues games, like the Alien RPG, Minds of Moria, like Blade Runner. Their system is, you're rolling a fistful of dice, and then it's just about icon recognition. Okay, those are the crosshair is like those are hits. The face hugger is, oh no, something bad's happening. Nice and easy, like just icon recognition. And yeah, like it did not take long for that to yield really good results in playtesting. When we switched over, it was that people with our game as well, because we wanted that feeling of like, if you're good at something, you should be consistently good at it. Not, I've been doing this for years, but today I rolled a 1, so I guess something I should be able to do, I just can't do today. Or vice versa, I have no earthly business being able to do this, but I rolled a nat 20, and the rules of the game say that means I always succeed. So it lets us it lets us support people with odds a lot more when they should be good at something, and it lets us discourage people with odds a lot more when they're not supposed to be good at something. So, you still have that really outside chance, but, it lets us be more consistent with what's going on, and I think it's more fun when you're sitting at that table and you get to And yep.
All your Fireball fans out there, you know who you are, you
Yep.
wizards. And people who play way too much Warhammer, you all know that feel. Look, in my later years of DMing, I have pulled up fistfuls of dice for various damage rolls, and that makes there's also some gravitas to it there. So
Yeah,
definitely has like some weight to it physically and emotionally at the table. I think
that's right. Yeah.
I think if I was gonna like look at that as like a whole statement around like where you're like as a design, we want to take it away from just you in a design space. I think what I would say is like, being not wrong, but like adjusting how you look at your game and how you test when you're looking like rather than just from mechanics, looking from what you expect, your gamer experience, the experience of the person playing the game was a big thing that you put, like you wanted to hear at the start of your game design document for your new game. So sticking to that more so than sticking to a mechanic setting is something I think I don't even know if people would do that a lot, or whether like a core piece, because a D20 system or D6 system makes a whole different game to how you weight it and all that. So I think maybe if I was going to water that down and be like, just be willing to try more things and be happy to be wrong, because you could stumble across something that's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
To use an anecdote that I've heard, but I don't know, I haven't fact checked it, but I know like it is an approach across design in general. And so a useful anecdote I think is that the approach between European car makers and Japanese car makers, the difference between the two is that when a so specifically when a German automaker is making a car, they go, "We made this car like this, and here's a manual for it. And so long as you use it in the way that this manual tells you to, it is going to be a phenomenal car. It's going to work really well for a very long time. They're really well made to do what they made them to do." The difference in the Japanese automakers' approach is that they went, "How are people using cars? We need to make our cars really good at doing what that is, not what we think people should use our cars for." And that is why Japanese cars are the most reliable cars in the world, because they went, how do people need these cars to work? And that's how we're going to build them, rather than this is how we think a car should work and this is what we want you to do with it. And when you start with like, it's the same fundamental philosophy of going like, what is the user experience? And how do we build for that experience rather than us telling people the kinds of experiences that they should have? So if you build a product that can really hone in on that, I think you're on the right track to making a really good game. So,
Yeah, wise words if I've ever heard them. Like, yeah, I until this, and probably a couple other conversations, I never would have done I even thought about game creative in that way. I think that's what I'm really enjoying most about doing these sessions here where we record and actually just have a chat with people. And they're always on topic at that. And we've been here for it's been 2.5 hours, man. It's been a time. It's part of that just like growth and like you learn about it as you go. And like I think that regardless of whether anyone like hundreds of thousands of people end up watching this or not, like doesn't matter. Like it equips me to deal with that more. And as like a representative for Indieverse, I really enjoy that, being able to share that knowledge, even if never see me talk to someone else about it. Like being able to dilute it down into like the conversations that I have is it's phenomenal. It is great.
Yep.
Was there anyone you'd like to shout out? I mean, obviously for yourselves, but just before we
yeah, I mean, I guess all the links will be at the bottom.
Sure will.
Yeah, I guess if you're if you are an aspiring game designer, if you're in the role-playing game space, the Australian role-playing community is a phenomenal resource. You can find them on Discord, endless amounts of assistance available from other people who've walked this same path. And I guess otherwise, just go to our website and buy our game.
So. Yeah, do it, guys. Do it. Go to the website, buy the game. It's great. Absolutely great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for jumping on today, man. It's unfortunate Tom couldn't join us, but look, I think we might have been here for 4 hours if he was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I'll have to do a
maybe you can do a follow-up with Tom in another interview and find out all the things that I was talking crap about.
Yeah, look, maybe I'll put it on the radar for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks so much again, man, and thank you guys for
No, thank
tuning
you.
in. We'll see you next time in the universe. And have a good day. We'll see you there. Bye.
Awesome. See ya.